Get ready to conquer New York like a pro. Whether it's your first visit or your 100th, this ultimate guide has every tip, trick, and secret to make your next trip to the Big Apple flawless. Here we go. After going through hundreds of first-timers' itineraries, these are the 20 attractions I tend to see come up the most, and my criteria here is value for your money, value for your time, and how unique it is in New York. At number 20, Madame Tussauds. Probably no shock here. I think the reason this spot is so popular is because it's on a lot of those attraction passes and the fact that it's in Midtown Manhattan. Let's look at the pros, and I understand why you'd go here, especially if you're visiting from overseas and you're a fan of American pop culture. I guess it would look cool posing next to realistic wax dummies of your favorite celebrities, and because it's on those attraction passes, it's probably included in the cost. If you're in Midtown anyway and traveling with kids, it could be interesting. The cons, where to begin? First off, there's 23 of these around the world, so you could do this in a lot of other cities. This honestly feels more like an LA kind of thing to me. Also, there's very little New York experiences inside. They have this replica subway station, but outside of that, I hate to use the term, but this spot is a bit of a tourist trap, and that's why it's last on my list. Up next, Coney Island, Brooklyn, and I'm not talking about the businesses in the neighborhood, I'm just talking about the amusement park and boardwalk. So for the pros, this is a cool spot for families, and if you're visiting New York and want that American boardwalk experience, you could scratch that itch here. It's also home to the first Nathan's in the world, which is actually one of the cons in my opinion, because I think Nathan's is overrated and not worth the trek just to Coney Island for that. Also, unless you're a huge fan of amusement parks, it is a hike from Midtown Manhattan. You're eating up 1 hour each way to get there, and it's really only lively during the summer. Yes, they do have a Winterfest now, which was pretty cool, so we will give an exception to that rule, but it's really not a year-round place to visit. And I may be biased here because I grew up in Jersey and like their boardwalk so much more, but if time is tight, I just don't think this is a must-do for first-timers. And their beach is nothing special. I'd pick Rockaway Beach, Queens over Coney Island any day. The Circle Line Harbor Lights Cruise, one of the most popular tourist boats out there, and at $52, here's what you need to know. The pros. I actually was impressed by the narrator of the ride. He was a native New Yorker, and he even taught me some facts that I didn't even know about. And just cruising around the Statue of Liberty and the East River at night, that was really amazing and totally worthy of all the photos and videos that you'd want to take. Now the cons. These things are absolutely mobbed with other tourists, so you'll be competing for the best seats if you don't get there like an hour early, and probably selfie sticks as well, because keep in mind, they're on all the attraction passes. Also, there's a lot of other boat rides that are less crowded and take similar routes. Heck, you could take the $4 NYC Ferry and recreate most of the route yourself. Hint, hint, we did an entire video on this topic. I just find this thing really touristy, and there's a lot of other boat rides you could take that, in my opinion, pack in more value. Number 17, Little Island. This is one of the newest attractions on the list, and it's on most tourists' radar because of its Manhattan location right on the water. Pros, it's free, and that's always a win. And I like the quirky, surrealistic design from the outside. It's also in front of the port where the Titanic survivors arrived, which is really cool. It's right next to the High Line as well, so you could easily package the two together. Now the cons. I don't actually find the inside of Little Island that interesting. The views are only okay of the skyline. It can get a bit crowded as well. That being said, I'd still consider a quick peek inside if you have the time and are visiting attractions near the meatpacking district anyway, but this is not even close to my favorite free thing to do in New York. In fact, if you want a whole list of free things to do in the city, check out the video we made on the topic. And if you're curious, my #1 free attraction in New York is the rooftop of the Stavros Niarchos Library. Number 16, Times Square. And if you know absolutely nothing else about New York, you probably heard of Times Square. It's honestly the center of the world, and it's on every single first-timer's checklist for obvious reasons. The pros. I admit at night going to Times Square is a requirement. The bright lights, the billboards, the vibe is distinctly New York. Before Vegas, this was probably the shiniest place in the US. I also enjoy the Midnight Moment, which occurs every night on the billboards around midnight and is the world's largest digital art display.
On to the cons. There's a reason why most local New Yorkers steer clear of this spot unless they have family or friends visiting. It's super crowded all the time, packed full of tourists taking photos, and almost every single scam I've ever talked about is present here, from the fake monks to the CD guys, the Disney characters, and people trying to hand you pamphlets and sell you stuff at every corner. It's honestly a nuisance to walk through. I still recommend going at least once because you'll probably be in Midtown Manhattan at some point anyway. Number 15, Rockefeller Center. Now, Rockefeller Center is synonymous with New York during the holidays, although people do visit it year-round. The pros. This is the holiday headquarters of New York because most of the Christmas attractions are nearby, starting with a Christmas tree and famous ice skating rink, which I admit is super iconic. Any time of year, they keep the area relatively clean and manicured, so it wouldn't hurt to walk by even during non-holiday times. On to the cons. Well, for one, if it's not between late November and early January, it's just not super exciting. And when you visit during the holidays, it is a mob scene the closer to Christmas you get. This year, they were even charging people money to get closer to the tree. So just remember, it's one of the most famous Christmas destinations in the world, and everybody else wants to get in there too. And beware of costume characters and rogue Santas charging money for photos there. Number 14, One World Observatory. Pros. It's near the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, so you could easily combine those on an itinerary. For another, it's the only observation deck that is completely indoors, so if it's super cold out or windy, you'll be fine there. And it has by far the best elevator ride of any observation deck as it shows you the construction of New York right in front of your eyes. You also have incredible views of the surrounding region, and being at the bottom of Manhattan, it's the only one with a good view of the Statue of Liberty. The cons. Well, that pro about being indoors is also one of its cons in that I really prefer being outside for at least part of a viewing experience. Also, you are not in Midtown Manhattan, so you won't have that same experience being surrounded by big buildings on all sides. This one comes down to preference, and I just like the other observation decks a bit more. Number 13, the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum. And this is literally housed on a decommissioned aircraft carrier, which already makes it super interesting in my book. The pros. If you're a fan of military history, this could be number one on your list. Admission is $36, which is cheaper than any observation deck. They have tons of old aircraft on the decks and even a replica of the Enterprise space shuttle. And now you can even board the old British Airway Concorde, which traveled across the Atlantic in under 3 hours. I really enjoyed the Growler submarine as well. It felt like I was living at sea. As for the cons, the biggest one for me is if you don't like military history, it won't excite you. And even if you do, there's also 5 aircraft carrier museums in the US. So while it's super cool, it's not the most unique thing to do in New York, but I'm still a big fan. Number 12, the Edge Sky Deck, another observation deck on the list, and we actually went to its grand opening back in March 2020. This is the tallest outdoor observation deck in the Western Hemisphere. As for the pros, it's one of the most unique observation decks. I love the angled glass panels which you can lean on. Also the way it's set up, I really feel like I'm just walking over the city more than any other observatory. And the location on the west side of Manhattan gives you a cool vantage point that none of the other decks do. And it has City Climb if you're willing to shell out $185 to literally lean off a building. My palms get sweaty just thinking about that. As for the cons, for that same reason, it's not one of my favorites because I love being in the middle of the concrete jungle at the 3 Midtown Manhattan observation decks. I've also heard some complaints about crowds there, as it's just one long deck and not spread out over multiple areas like some of the other ones on the list. Number 11, the Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge is one of the top free things to do in New York, I'll admit. And the first pro is it's really beautiful and iconic. Keep in mind, this was the longest suspension bridge in the world when it was completed in 1883. The views are outstanding. It's an amazing walk, although I recommend taking the ferry over to Dumbo and then walking back to get those skyline views. So you could even bike this, although those lanes are kind of narrow. Beware if you're not a confident cyclist. As for the cons, the biggest con is that it gets absolutely mobbed with tourists. So I recommend trying to do this early in the day if you want to get the best photo opportunities. Another issue here is you can't see the Brooklyn Bridge from the Brooklyn Bridge, so keep that in mind. Number 10, the High Line. And the High Line is one of my favorite free attractions in New York. It's an elevated park on what used to be freight train tracks. The pros. I am such a fan of this because, as I said, it's free and I actually love walking it. You don't have to do the whole thing to enjoy it. There's a lot of exits. Anytime I'm in the area, I just hop on and stare at some of the art or views of the city. Even walking 5 to 10 minutes of it is worth it for me, although you could walk from Meatpacking all the way to Hudson Yards, which I recommend if it's your first time in the city. As for the cons, I don't have too many to list here. It can get super swarmed with people depending on when you go, and being outdoors, it is quite weather dependent. Number 9, the Empire State Building. The Empire State is one of New York's biggest icons, and as far as buildings are concerned, it's one of my favorites, but we're here to discuss their observation deck experience. The pros. If you're into Art Deco architecture, the interior of the building is absolutely a marvel. I always admire it as I walk around. I also like some of the additions, the cool exhibits like the King Kong one, and some extra New York history that you can learn about. The elevator ride up is really neat, seeing the old school construction workers. The cons. Well, the biggest con is that you can't see the Empire State Building from the Empire State Building. Also, I don't love the steel bars at the top. It creates a bit more of an obstructed view. They have the option to go to the 102nd floor, creating a 2-for-1 experience. But for an extra $35, I don't think it's worth it, especially if you've already been to One World Observatory. Finally, this is probably the most popular observation deck in the world, so expect crowds. Number 8, Central Park. We're going from the most famous building in the world to probably the most famous park in the world. Pros, there's just so many to mention. Besides being a free place to just relax and people watch, it's got so many little hidden attractions inside. We shot an entire guide to the park, which you should watch, but some of my favorite places to hang out are Sheep's Meadow and the Conservatory Garden on the northern side of the park. You can't go wrong just wandering about either and getting lost. It's truly an amazing place. Cons, I don't have too many for Central Park, except that some of the areas get really busy during peak seasons. Also, if you're not a fan of horse-drawn carriages, you will see that, and be careful with pedicabs. I advise setting a rate first, otherwise you'll be on the hook for $3 to $7 a minute. Do the math, it could cost you as much as your plane ticket or hotel room. Number 7, the American Museum of Natural History, and this is one of those classic museums that is certainly worth a trip for anyone. The pros, at $28 for non-residents, I think it's an amazing value. We recently visited the newly opened Gilder Center wing, and if you're traveling with young kids, it's so hands-on and interesting. I think any of them would like it. If you're a fan of science and the natural world, you could literally spend an entire day here going through their exhibits. Also, if you're into dinosaur fossils, this is one of the best places in the entire world to see them. Cons. The only major con I could really say would be if you're not into science, and you probably wouldn't enjoy this very much. And they've disbanded their Pay What You Wish program for non-tri-state area residents, so you will pay full price if you're not from New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut. Number 6, Top of the Rock, and this is one of my all-time favorite observation decks. Of all the observation decks, because of its location, you really feel like you're immersed around Midtown Manhattan. It's on the 67th, 69th, and 70th floors, so you don't feel like you're looking down on the city, but more part of it. I also like that there's 3 different floors, so it spreads out the traffic a lot. And when I visited all 5 decks in one day, this one had the smallest crowds. They've also recently added the Beam, a new attraction for $25 extra, where you sit on a beam and get twirled around like the famous photo Lunch Atop a Skyscraper. As for the cons, there's not too many here. Some would argue because it's the lowest observation deck, you won't get the same bird's eye view of the city. If you really want to be standing high, then you'd probably like One World Observatory more. Number 5, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, one of the top art museums on the planet and one of the cultural meccas of New York. Honestly, there are too many pros even to mention here. You can see anything from ancient Greek sculptures to Van Gogh to the Harlem Renaissance. There's so many genres on display. The Temple of Dender, an ancient Egyptian temple built in the 1st century BC, has been on display here for 50 years. These are the reasons you come to New York, to see things like this. And it's no shock to get around 7 million visitors a year. If you want a quick guide on how to see the Met in just 2 hours, watch the video we shot here with my old art history professor. Cons, the most obvious is if you're not into art, you probably want to skip this. Also, the cost at $30 for general admission. It is the most expensive museum in New York City, and they also did away with the pay what you wish program unless you're a resident of the tri-state area or a student. Number 4, see a Broadway show. As far as I'm concerned, seeing a Broadway show is a must for any first-timers. You are getting the best of the best on stage here in New York. The greatest pro of Broadway is that there's every type of show out there, from stuff your kids would like, to serious dramas, to fun musicals. There's usually at least 3 or 4 shows at any given time that I would even love to go see if I had the chance. Back to the Future, I'm looking at you. So if you get a chance to see it, let me know how it is. Tickets are the greatest con of Broadway because many of the most popular shows are extremely expensive or even sold out. I always talk about ways around this, like going to the TKTS booth in Midtown Manhattan or trying to do rush tickets, but because these theaters are small, there's just some shows that are red hot where there's almost no way to avoid paying your mortgage for a few seats. And if money is really a factor, I'd say consider an off-Broadway or off-Broadway show to get that fix in, because the majority of those actors are amazing and have trained their whole lives as well. Number 3, Summit One Vanderbilt, which is the newest observation deck in New York, my personal favorite. The pros, well, since it's the newest, if it's a return trip, you probably haven't done it yet. I think I just got bored with the whole observation deck concept of going to stare at other buildings, but here you have 2 floors of all glass. That's more of an interactive experience. There's other cool rooms as well and spots to look down at the city. And of course, they have a rooftop where you can get those classic views on the 93rd floor, plus an extra elevator ride up if you really want to soar 12 stories higher. I just can't think of any observation deck that blends the traditional with this much interaction. The cons, some people may find Summit a bit too gimmicky or distracting you from your main purpose of just looking out at other buildings. And if you just want a pure observation deck, then Top of the Rock would probably be better for you. I've also gotten some reports that it has been overcrowded during peak tourist periods. Number 2, the Statue of Liberty, the symbol of American freedom. This may be New York's biggest icon. The pros. I actually had not visited the statue till about 4 years ago, and it truly left a mark on me. Not just seeing it from the boat and imagining how many immigrants from around the world saw it when they arrived in New York for the first time, but just being up close and personal with it. I also highly recommend you buy tickets way in advance to get crown access. Of all the tourist things I've ever done in New York, and I've done every single one on this list, going inside the crown by far took my breath away the most. To see the statue and how it was designed, like a VIP behind the scenes, you just can't put a price tag on that, but we will since it's $31.80. You also get access to Ellis Island with any statue ticket, which tells the story of New York as an immigration hub and is well worth at least an extra hour. Make sure to book tickets on Statue Cruises' website, the official vendor, and not a rip-off site, and be aware of scams close to the statue port in Battery Park. They even have warnings up reminding you to buy it only from the official vendor, Statue Cruises. Cons, well, there aren't many cons to the Statue of Liberty. I would say that if you are buying crown access and you have mobility issues, the stairway is very narrow, so it probably wouldn't be for you. Also, if you're afraid of heights, I probably would avoid going to the crown because of said stairwell. I've also been hearing from fellow guides that the lines to board the boats have been extremely long lately, so make sure to arrive early, which brings us to the other issue. Going to the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island will eat up at least half a day. And if you only have 1 or 2 days in the city, this may be too much time to budget for it. So if you have other things you'd really rather see, then the statue may not make sense on a short trip. At the top of our list is the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, located in Lower Manhattan. I think this is a must for every visitor to New York, as that day changed this city and country so much. The pros, the memorial fountains are free to visit and located right outside of the museum. I can't think of a more morose place to visit in the city, but it's important to pay your respects to all the victims of that horrible day. And please, no smiling selfies here. I will admit I had never been inside of the museum until about a month ago when I had friends in town, and I have to say, it really affected me on a deep level. bringing back memories from 20 plus years ago. And as I walked around, I realized that those who didn't live through it or remember it owe it to themselves to find out about that historical moment in time that defined and strengthened New York. It was really, really eye-opening. The only con I can think of is the museum is very realistic and it may be too much for some people. Keep that in mind, but they do have tissues at some of the exhibits.
Did you know the average visitor to NYC ends up feeling overwhelmed because they're afraid of making mistakes? So in this video, I'm gonna tell you 11 things you should never do in the Big Apple, how you can use this knowledge to have a better trip and feel more like a local and less like a tourist. Here we go. Traveling without this in New York is like eating a huge plate of spaghetti in Little Italy with a white shirt on and no bib. And I'm guilty of this mistake myself, and that's forgetting to have some hand sanitizer with you at all times. Let's face it, New York is a dirty place. We've got 8 million people roaming about, and when you're doing things like riding the subway, it can get pretty icky. And a lot of times you're on the run. Maybe you're popping into a bodega or a pizza spot which won't have a bathroom open to clean up. Take matters into your own hands and make sure at least one person in your group always has a small hand sanitizer with them. And the great thing is that even if you forget it, you can buy them at any small little stand in the city. And speaking of buying things from small stands, later on in this video, I'm gonna reveal one of the biggest tourist scams that most visitors don't even realize happens to them. Not tipping properly. Now, this tends to drive my non-North American viewers crazy. A general rule of thumb at restaurants in New York is tip 20% as long as the service was decent on your pre-tax bill total. At a coffee shop, I like to leave $1 if someone's making me a latte, for example. Fast food places, you really don't need to tip. If you want to drop $1 in the tip jar if you have a good interaction, feel free. But if you get one of those terminals that asks you to leave a tip, don't feel pressured to do it if it's for something fast. Like I was at a cafe a few weeks ago and I ordered a water for $1.50 and it asked if I wanted to leave an additional tip and I said no. And the person working there was not angry at me. For tourists specifically, taking a taxi, I'd lean on a 20% tip, assuming everything went well. Same with an Uber. Bellman at a hotel who takes your bags, I'd say $2 per bag is sufficient. At a bar, I like to pay $1 per drink. Now, if you're paying as you go, make sure that you tip after every drink you pay with cash. If you're doing something called opening up a tab, then you're gonna tip at the end and you just have to tell the bartender, I want to close out, which is something that I actually don't see outside of North America, that terminology, so it's good to know. Avoid trying the local classics. I want to challenge all of you out there to do something. Yes, eat your share of pizza and bagels, the obvious stuff, but I also want you to seek out foods that only local and, dare I say, old-time New Yorkers really appreciate. If you want a real New York experience, go to Ray's Candy Shop, and if you're lucky enough to see Ray Alvarez, who's 90 years young, order an egg cream. Or go to Jonas Schimmel's and order a knish, which used to be all over the city in street food carts and are much tougher to find now. Or to top all this off, if you saw our Anthony Bourdain video, go eat breakfast at Barney Greengrass on the Upper West Side. Order a sturgeon platter or Nova salmon on a bagel, a real appetizing experience from the past. You won't find stuff like this anywhere else. Doing any of these is like knowing the secret handshake to an elite club, getting into confrontations with strangers. Now, a lot has been made on the media about the increase of crime in New York. And in many of these reports, you tend to see there was some kind of an argument or a confrontation before somebody got assaulted. And the reality of traveling in a big city is that you will encounter mental illness and people under the influence of drugs potentially on a daily basis, especially if you're in Midtown Manhattan or taking the subway. Now, the vast majority of you will have no incident, but in case anybody tries to instigate anything with you, don't engage them. In my 12 years of living here, I've had a few situations where somebody got mad at me, for example, for ignoring them. Keep walking. If you're on the subway, switch cars at the next stop. If someone's blasting music or being rude, this is not the place to correct their behavior because you don't know what their mental state is, how they react, or what they're carrying on them. It's not worth your time to get into fights with people who have less to lose than you unless it is an absolute
last resort. Making these subway mistakes. Now, there's so many potential mistakes a first-timer can make on the subway that we have an entire video dedicated to this, but just in case, I want to highlight some of the more popular ones. One would be boarding an empty subway car during regular hours, and it either smells like somebody died in there, or the air conditioner isn't working, and it's hotter than the sun. We'll add the obvious, not moving in when the subway is crowded to give people more space, and don't even think about blocking the doors when the subway comes to a stop and those doors open. And it's not considered good practice, or very sanitary for that matter, to eat a meal on the subway. Although I don't know what possibly would inspire you to do such a thing, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. Mispronouncing famous streets or subway stops. Now, if you really want to impress the locals here, if you can nail all of these pronunciations, you're gonna be a step ahead. I think the most commonly mispronounced street in all of New York City is this one. How would you pronounce it? It's pronounced Houston Street, named after William Houston, who was a delegate from the state of Georgia to the Continental Congress. Another neighborhood you're likely to explore is this one, pronounced Greenwich Village, not Greenwich Village. And if you go to the High Line, you may enter on Gansevoort Street. Now, for extra credit, I want you to try pronouncing this for me. This is the name of a subway station. How would you say it? If you said Hoyt Schermerhorn, you would be incorrect. The proper pronunciation is Hoyt Skimmerhorn, and I have even messed that up on a video in the past, so many of us are guilty of that one. And for the record, there is no such thing as the Lower West Side of Manhattan, and most locals refer to it as Lower Manhattan, not downtown Manhattan, although you can be heading in the downtown direction in Manhattan or heading uptown. I have to say, I think I may have found the coolest basketball hoop location in the world. That person has a hoop on their apartment rooftop overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. Not engaging enough with local New Yorkers that you encounter on your trip. And I'm talking about tour bus drivers, taxi drivers, restaurant workers, people at the hotels, even New Yorkers that you just encounter striking up a conversation with. So many locals in the service industries here have stories upon stories and tips that I can't even offer you. When I travel, sometimes the best advice I've ever received are from the taxi driver or the Uber driver who picked me up from the airport. Heck, my wife Adriana told me a story about how in San Juan, Puerto Rico, the Uber driver that her and her friends got one day gave them a tip about a restaurant which they visited 3 times during that trip and she still dreams about. So don't be afraid to strike up conversations with local New Yorkers that you encounter during your travel here, because you're just a wealth of information. And despite the negative stereotypes, most local New Yorkers are extremely helpful if you're in need. Renting a car. If you think you need a car on a trip to New York City, especially if you're staying in Manhattan, I gotta tell you, I think you're crazy. Even if you're anti-public transit, just taking Ubers and taxis would make more sense financially and be a lot less stressful. Then let's factor in post-COVID the addition of outdoor dining facades taking up tons of parking spots. And we've got congestion pricing coming here in 2024. And we talk about this on our last video about price raises. Between parking tickets, paying for garages, you are looking at a big old pile of hassle. Renting a car in Manhattan is like ordering a salad at a steakhouse. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. The exception to this would be if you're extending a trip to other cities or other parts of the United States, then renting a car to leave the city would make perfect sense. Not having a plan for rain or extremes in the weather. Now, I've harped on this time and time again about having your New York City ideas split up into different parts of the city: Upper Manhattan, Midtown, Lower Manhattan, and the outer boroughs. You always have to be prepared for inclement weather here because it's just so unpredictable. I'd have a list of your top museum choices, shopping areas, restaurants, shows on or off Broadway, ready to go in case we get a few days of rain, an epic heat wave, a brutal cold snap. You just don't know what you're gonna get. And my favorite times of year here, when people ask, I always say May and October tend to be the best 2 months for weather. This little scam is so widespread that most tourists don't even know that it happened to them.
We've mentioned this on the channel many times, but I'm gonna repeat it again and again for my new viewers. It's not asking for the price of street food before you order it if it's not listed there. And it still amazes me to this day how many street food trucks in New York don't have their prices listed on the outside. And if you order food without that price showing, a lot of times the vendor is gonna charge you whatever he thinks he can get away with, like paying $10 to $20 for a hot dog. And I realize there's people visiting from overseas who don't know what a New York street hot dog is worth. Maybe you think it's worth $20. I have the utmost respect for most of the street food vendors in New York. So many of them are honest, hardworking people, but there's just a few bad apples out there, and I am so tired of hearing these stories from you guys, so be on the lookout for that.
The 50 best free things to do in New York City in 10 minutes. Here we go. Want to impress your friends? The best free rooftop view in the city is on the top floor of the Stavros Niarchos Library in Midtown. Head to the 7th floor and you can get a straight up shot of the Empire State Building and the skyline, no entry or having to buy a drink required. Do you want to take a time machine? Check out the TWA Hotel attached to Terminal 5 at JFK Airport. This used to be the TWA Flight Center, and it's a free ticket to the golden era of flight in the 1960s. Why not visit the only olfactory art gallery in the world dedicated to art that has scent? This hidden gem in Chinatown is completely free to pop into during opening hours, and you can sniff your way through all the pleasant aromas, or if you're feeling adventurous, the stinky ones as well. Who is buried at Grant's tomb? I'll let you answer that one, but the largest mausoleum in North America is open to the public, and the final resting place of President Ulysses S. Grant and his wife. Greenwood Cemetery was one of New York's most visited landmarks, and we shot an entire video dedicated to showing you the famous sculptures and burial sites of this gem in Brooklyn. Completely free to stroll around if you're into the darker side of history. You don't really need this video to tell you to walk the Brooklyn Bridge, and while it's one of the most crowded tourist destinations in the city, it should be on every first-timer's list. Try to go earlier in the morning if you really want to take better photos and enjoy one of the most famous icons in New York. The Elevated Acre in Lower Manhattan is one of my all-time favorite secret parks. Take the nondescript escalator up and you're surrounded by big buildings and nature at the same time. There's also tremendous views of the East River and Brooklyn Bridge. The 9/11 Memorial is a must-see for any visitor to New York. The two fountains where the towers once stood are majestic, but also a reflective and poignant reminder of one of the saddest days in the country's history. Please, no smiling selfies here. The New York Public Library is a perfect rainy day drop-in. You can admire the ceiling murals upstairs, but the real winner here is the free Polanski exhibition on the ground floor, where you can see the original Winnie the Pooh and a copy of the Declaration of Independence. You can easily budget an hour inside. Times Square is quite obvious, but did you know every night from 11:57 p.m. to 12 a.m. you can watch The Midnight Moment, the world's largest digital public arts program. It's on 92 displays spanning 8 blocks. If you're a night owl, this is worth a quick stopover, as many tourists are completely oblivious that it's even going on. New York has tons of TV shows that need an audience absolutely for free. I even once went to The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and it was a little bit surreal. Check the show's website for details. If you want to see SNL, be prepared to wait in line all day. The Irish Hunger Memorial, dedicated to the Great Famine, is one of those hidden gems that you have to see to believe. They imported all the grass and even an old cottage from the Emerald Isle, and its location in Lower Manhattan makes this a great quick stopover to appreciate all the hardships that Irish immigrants had to endure on their journey to America. Lincoln Center's Summer for the City offers a series of concerts and events outside of the historic music hall. This is an absolutely fantastic way to feel like a local and take in world-class music and culture. We have a whole video dedicated to Central Park. You could spend an entire day exploring America's most famous park, although bring your walking shoes. But at least visit once to find out why both New Yorkers and tourists are so in love with it. Most tourists walk the Brooklyn Bridge, but did you know the Manhattan Bridge has a pedestrian path as well? And you can't see the Brooklyn Bridge from the Brooklyn Bridge, but you certainly can from the Manhattan. New York is the fashion capital of the world, and the museum at FIT has a permanent collection of more than 50,000 garments and accessories dating from the 18th century to the present. They even recently had an exhibition that showed fashion inspired by food, which sounds right up my alley. Chelsea in Manhattan is home to many of the city's art galleries, and a tradition every Thursday night is opening night for the public with free wine and even food as well. Check out galleries.now.net for a full list of openings so you can plot an entire evening of art gallery hopping. Another great, absolutely free museum is the National Museum of the American Indian. Learn about the history of Native Americans with some interactive exhibits and plenty to learn for all ages. I can't believe more people don't know about the Elizabeth Street Garden in Soho. This gem of community sculpture garden is under threat of closure and has so many beautiful little nooks to just spend an hour or more relaxing. It feels like you're on some rich philanthropist's country estate. Greenacre Park in Midtown East is such a pleasant surprise. To find a 25-foot waterfall hidden in such a busy area. Haley Park also has a little waterfall, and there's something about these hidden parks in New York that just excite me as a local, because finding peace in the concrete jungle isn't always as easy as you'd think. Only 1 block from Washington Square Park, Washington Mews might be my favorite street in Manhattan. Originally used as a row of stables for horses in the 18th and 19th centuries, it's now part of NYU, and walking this cobblestone path feels like you've been transported to a lost New York City. Fort Tryon Park in Washington Heights is such a magical place to go for a walk. With beautiful views of the Hudson River and George Washington Bridge, it's a local's favorite. Added bonus, take a look at the Cloisters Museum from the outside. It's like staring at an old castle. The High Line is New York's worst kept secret, but I like to say it's my favorite tourist activity to do. Nothing quite like walking on an abandoned train line converted into a gorgeous elevated park. We have an entire video dedicated to the High Line if you want a more structured itinerary. I always said if money was no object, I'd have an apartment in the West Village, because you just can't beat the charming neighborhood vibes. Roaming the beautiful tree-lined blocks and admiring all the cute shops, cafes, and multi-million-dollar homes, Bushwick, Brooklyn is an incredible neighborhood to appreciate the city's street art scene. Take a self-guided walking tour, and you can use free tours by Foot's website to admire some of the Bushwick Collective and other artist murals. Another fun summertime activity is movie night in Bryant Park. Now the lawn opens 3 hours early, and I recommend going early to grab the best vantage point. The Staten Island Ferry may be the most famous boat ride in the city. It's completely free. Board and sit on the right side to get a nice view of the Statue of Liberty. The Met 81st Street studio opened last year and is any traveler with children's dream come true. It's absolutely free, located downstairs from the Met Museum, and recommended for ages 3 to 11. It's very interactive and hands-on. During the warmer months, you can go kayaking for free on the Hudson River in Manhattan or East River in Brooklyn. Just sign up in advance online. Pretty surreal to experience the New York skyline for 20 minutes on board a kayak, one of my favorite free activities in this video. Enjoy a free concert at the Juilliard School, which is the world's best performing arts college. See the stars before they perform at places like Carnegie Hall. Check Juilliard's website for the calendar. Summer Stage annually presents nearly 80 free and benefit performances in Central Park and neighborhood parks throughout the 5 boroughs. Check the Summer Stage website for a list of what's free and what's paid, but it's first come, first serve, so plan on arriving early. If you've ever been tired of watching lectures on YouTube, go watch some famous and influential people talk at the New School. They have so many topics available, from economics to social justice and more. See their website for what's coming up. Grand Central Terminal is just full of history. The Constellation mural on the ceiling and the Whispering Gallery in the food court are just some of the fun things you can get into at one of the most beautiful train stations in the world. And after admiring Grand Central, why not walk a few minutes to the Ford Foundation building and explore their free atrium garden in the lobby? It's a tropical rainforest in Midtown Manhattan. Get a Big Apple greeter for free. Seriously, a local New Yorker will be matched with you based on your preferences and if they're available, to show you their favorite spots. No tipping allowed. Consider it a local insider. Check out bigapplegreeter.org for more details. Holy Apostle Soup Kitchen accepts volunteers, including tourists, even for a day. I made a video about my experience there, and if you're into traveling and making a difference, you should consider it. Are you a baseball junkie and love history? Well, the original location of Ebbets Field, home to the Brooklyn Dodgers, is now an apartment complex. But outside of the apartment, you can find a plaque commemorating where home plate once stood. If you find yourself in Prospect Lefferts Gardens, take any baseball fan here for a fun surprise. There's not a lot of neighborhoods on this list, but I think there's something really magical and enchanting about Forest Hills Gardens in Queens. This area was based on the garden cities of the UK, and it feels like you stepped into a Harry Potter movie just walking around. A lot of tourists love going to the free gospel mass in Harlem. What a great way to open the doors to some local culture, and there's 9 different churches that accept walk-ins on Sundays. Check out our latest Harlem food video for where to grab some grub when you're done. If you absolutely need to get some nature before or after your flight out of JFK and Queens, check out the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge with 9,000 acres of open bay, salt marsh, mud flats, upland field and woods, and for bird watchers, nearly half the species in the Northeast have been spotted here in the last 25 years. Go see the Captain America statue located conspicuously in the lobby of a Bed Bath & Beyond in Sunset Park, because we all need to be superheroes to survive a trip to that store. We've got a 2-for-1 special inside the Cultural Services building of the French Embassy. Upstairs is the Albertine bookstore, which besides being the largest French language bookstore in the US, has a beautiful interior with celestial mural above. Then head downstairs to see the Venetian Room, a rare surviving piece of New York's Gilded Age. The Little Red Lighthouse right under the George Washington Bridge is a bit of a trek to get to, but such a cool find. It's been there over 100 years and a great symbol of the city's maritime past. Portland Alley is what New York looks like in many TV shows and movies, since it's one of the top filming locations in the city. Well, you'll need to pay $2.90 to get here by SkyTram, but once you're on Roosevelt Island, it's free to explore this 2-mile strip of land with a lot of historical sites and epic views of the skyline. This is one of my favorite viewpoints in all of NYC. The Brooklynites Promenade is just a 15-minute walk uphill from the tourist mecca of Dumbo, and so much more local. This art installation was built on the 34th Street NR platform, and you can reach your hand up and have a light flash and music play as you compose your own music underground. In the basement of the New Yorker Hotel, check out the Nikola Tesla exhibit, open to the public. The inventor spent the last 10 years of his life living in the hotel, and you can see photos and artifacts dedicated to the quirky futurist. If you're like me and you hate shopping for clothes, at least you can ride the old wooden escalators at Macy's. These are 100 years old and some of the last remaining ones in the world. Today, we'll be ranking the most famous New York eateries and restaurants that seem to be on every tourist's radar. We'll share the pros and cons of each and let you know which ones are actually worth your valuable time. Then we'll even name some less famous but local alternatives that you may not have heard of but need to. Here we go. Let's start the rankings, and the factors we'll look at are location, how iconic they are, and value for your money. Starting with number 12, most famous hot dog in New York, Nathan's. Ranking this one last for a variety of reasons, but let's start with the pros. If you are a history buff, this is where the hot dog was invented. At the corner of Surf and Stillwell Avenue in Coney Island, Brooklyn, there's a nostalgia factor of eating this next to what was once America's most famous boardwalk. Sure, I guess the interior is kind of cool. It's very colorful and kitschy, so you could take a nice photo. The cons, well, you need to schlep almost an hour from Midtown for a hot dog. And the last time I went, it was about $5, which is way more than you'd pay for a random dirty water dog on the street in the city. And I don't think you're getting a better product. Seriously, I can't tell the difference between this and a Nathan's in Apopka, Florida. It's a hot dog. And don't get me started on the lines either. My advice here, if you want to knock a hot dog off your list, go to a local. My viewer's top pick is Billy's next to Central Park, so you can chat with someone who's done it for 30 years. Another favorite is Dan Rossi, the hot dog king who sets up in front of the Met and is a disabled veteran. And later on in the video, we mentioned another famous local hot dog spot that I like way more. Junior's. Now, in all fairness, this review is about going for their famous cheesecake. I haven't tried any of their other diner items. The pros. Well, the greatest pro of Junior's is its location for tourists. They have 2 locations in Midtown at 49th and 45th Streets. The original is in downtown Brooklyn, and the only one I've ever visited, so it's easy to get to, and perhaps the name recognition would cause you to eat there. They're also open till midnight on weekdays and 1 a.m. on weekends, which is helpful if you're a night owl. The cons. The Midtown locations are quite expensive. A simple 2-egg platter for breakfast is $13.95. But what we're here to talk about is the famous cheesecake. It's $9.25, almost $10 for a slice of cheesecake. Now, if this was the best cheesecake in New York City, I could maybe let it slide, but Junior's is not on that level. Being brutally honest, it's on about the same level as cheesecakes I'd eat at diners growing up in Jersey. I actually didn't know much about Junior's till I started this channel and saw how frequently tourists were mentioning dining there. I've tried it a few times and just don't get the hype. My all-time favorite New York cheesecake still belongs to Eileen's Special Cheesecake, and they sell a small version which is perfect for the on-the-go tourist. Nam Wat Tea Parlor. You may have walked by Doyer Street in Chinatown and seen a huge line, and they are the cause. The pros. They're Chinatown's oldest dim sum parlor, and being in business for over 100 years in New York really says something. The vibe inside honestly feels like you're on a movie set. The retro diner feel is pulled off so well. This could be the most photogenic spot on the list, and if that's all you're looking for, then you should eat a meal there. Which leads us to the cons, because while it passes the vibe check, the dim sum is just okay. Having dined at a lot of other dim sum spots all over Chinatown, I think you could do better. If I had to pick one similar spot in Chinatown instead, I'd walk a few blocks away to Ping's. It's more local, and I prefer the food quality and pricing. Joe's is the kind of spot people either love or hate, and I find myself somewhere in the middle. The pros. Joe's has become quite synonymous with a New York slice. The OG location on Carmine Street in the Village always has a crowd, but don't let that scare you because the line moves fast. A ton of celebrities have eaten there, and heck, Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker, used to work there. So that's pretty cool. If you were to just go to one spot for a slice in the city, you could do far worse. Just don't expect it to wow you. The cons. I think it's a bit overrated, and tourists really are obsessed with it. I can think of 10 other places off the top of my head where I'd rather go for a slice. The ingredients are fine, but it just doesn't stand out to me in any way. I find a lot of people that are in love with the spot like it because of nostalgia, or they just haven't tried many other pizzerias in the city, or heck, even in Greenwich Village. I'd send you to Bleecker Street Pizza a few blocks away for a slice over them. Joe's is stuck in time, and if that's what you're after, I say go for it, but I've just become too much of a pizza snob to really promote them that much. Katz's Deli, another spot that tourists are absolutely in love with, and many locals will fight you to the death if you dare slander them, but it's sitting on 8th on my list for a reason. The pros. Going to Katz's is a New York experience, albeit a rather touristy one these days. Walk in, grab your ticket, and then wait in a long line to get called up to the counter where you can even sample a little of your deli meat while your pastrami gets sliced up. You won't find this rite of passage anywhere else in New York, and for that, I think they're one of a kind. Outside of the obvious that it's touristy and you may have to wait in a long line, we'll jump right to the pastrami sandwich. I don't love their rye bread, which really struggles to hold together those monstrous mounds of meat, and the quality has been hit or miss. Sometimes I eat there and I think, all right, this is a classic for a reason, and other times I'm not sure if it's a tourist trap or not, and like most of the famous eateries on the list, it's expensive. Very expensive. $27 for a sandwich, some would consider that outrageous. Yes, it can serve 2 people or 1 very hungry person, but with it already costing your kids college fund to visit New York these days, I can't justify it. I tell you to go to Sarge's Deli to pay about the same price in a more local spot that tastes better, or even David's Brisket House in Brooklyn if you want a budget pastrami option, as they offer different sizes, which is practically unheard of. There aren't a lot of bagel spots on this list, but if I had to think of one that keeps coming up with my tourist watching, it would be Essa Bagel, and with 3 Manhattan locations, they are quite accessible. The pros. Much like a Joe's, if I was to put a New York bagel in a time capsule and bury it for 1,000 years, Essa Bagel would be a great example. They've been around for nearly 50, these bad boys are doughy and thick, and they normally smother on enough cream cheese to pave a driveway. This is definitely a solid bagel. If you're in Midtown, it could be worth a stop. As for the cons, it's not the best bagel in New York. While it's better than a random deli or bodega find, they don't hold up against the city's heavyweights. Yes, they are humongous. I just don't think they have the crispy texture or soft interior that the cream of New York's bagel crop have. And the flagship location in Midtown is both on tourists and locals' radar. It was the longest I had to wait in line for a bagel, which as a New Yorker, you'd want to be in and out in a hurry. It's just not worth the hype for me. Peter Luger's is a bit of a controversial topic. Like Katz's, people either love it or love to hate it. It's either the best steakhouse they've ever been to or a complete waste of money. Let's dive into this iconic steakhouse, open since 1887. The pros. On the channel, I've only ever covered their lunchtime burger special, which made with prime grade chuck is actually fantastic, and I prefer it to the steak. Although it's not the main reason that people go there, you go to Peter Luger's to step back in time. You go for the experience, the no-nonsense yet humorous waiters, the interesting characters that eat there, and a very good porterhouse steak. The cons. No matter what time your reservation is, you'll probably be waiting 15 to 30 minutes for the table. The service is kind of gruff, it's expensive, although what did you expect from an institution that really hasn't changed much over the years? I'm no expert on fine dining or steaks, but I have visited most of the famous spots in New York, and Peter Luger's didn't even rank in my top 3, which is a theme we're seeing throughout this video, that a lot of the legendary spots tend to rest on their laurels while other restaurants have to be on a higher level just to get attention. New York Times food critic Pete Wells, in his famed 1-star review of them, wrote, "What gnaws at me every time I eat a Luger porterhouse is the realization that it's just another steak and far from the best New York has to offer." Magnolia Bakery. Sex and the City may have put them on the map and on the radar of many tourists, but they've been well known for almost 30 years now. This review isn't about their cupcakes, which I find to be mediocre, but their banana pudding. The pros. Magnolia Bakery is on a beautiful block in the West Village on Bleecker, close enough for you to grab anything to go and wander some of the nicest streets in the city. I think it's still a good deal, $4.95 for a small order of their classic banana pudding, which somehow, after all these years, never disappoints. They have multiple flavors like red velvet, chocolate hazelnut, and more. Pro tip, order ahead on their website so you can skip the line. And maybe I'm biased because I used to live in the Village and frequented it, but this is a great pick. Cons. If you don't order in advance, the line can be a bit long depending on when you go. I never loved their cupcakes, and I've tried quite a few of them. I always liked Molly's Cupcakes, another Village institution, more, but New York has as many good cupcake places as it has good pizza spots, and I'm not docking them for this. Joe Shanghai. If you asked any tourist or newcomer to New York to name just one soup dumpling spot, this would be the answer. And this isn't even my favorite soup dumpling in Chinatown, but it's a place that I think does somewhat live up to the hype. Pros. The new location is actually really nice. They moved in 2019 to their Bowery Street spot after spending nearly 30 years on Pell. It's bigger, so wait times are less, the service is fast once you get in, and $11.95 for 8 pork soup dumplings is a fair price. These actually taste really good too. The broth has a nice flavor, and the pork and crab are my favorite. My Chinese-American friends Ben and Ming even put their seal of approval on the spot. As for the cons, if you like the communal-style seating of the original, that no longer exists. There was something kind of charming about that experience. Even with more seats, you are likely to wait for a table here, and you'll probably be surrounded by 80 to 90% tourists. It's also cash only, which is a mild nuisance since they do have ATM machines inside. I've heard from others that outside of the soup dumplings, some of the other food choices are pretty mediocre. Juliana's. This is in reference to Juliana's in Dumbo, Brooklyn, which used to be the original Grimaldi's location and has since entered the lore of New York pizza rivalries. But we won't go into that story on this video. Spoiler, Juliana's is way better, and this has become extremely popular with visitors to Dumbo after walking the Brooklyn Bridge. Pros. Their cold oven pizza, plain and simple, is worth it. This is the original oven that Patsy Grimaldi made famous. They know what they're doing, and for a nice group lunch or dinner, this is a fantastic choice. Heck, I think their classic margarita is so good, it doesn't even need extra toppings. Cons. There tends to be a line to get in here, and you can only order a pie, which could make this prohibitive if you're not very hungry. A pie starts at $26, which is not on the cheap side. I wouldn't call this the best pizza in New York, but it is definitely one of the better ones out there, especially in an area where if you're a tourist, you'll likely be exploring anyway. I wouldn't stop you from going at all. Gray's Papaya. This is the cheapest stop in the video, and it's really won me over. Pros. There's only one Gray's Papaya left in the city, and with Papaya King shutting its doors, it's the last of a dying breed, the tropical hot dog shop. Gray's has gotten lots of attention because of their crazy price deals, like their old recession special. Currently, it's $3.25 for a single hot dog and $6.95 for 2 hot dogs and one of their signature tropical drinks. The hot dog won't change your life, but standing in a fine New York institution that's been around for over 50 years just might. We also recently covered their breakfast special, which is so cheap, it seems like it's straight out of the 90s. $3 for a coffee and a breakfast sandwich of egg, cheese, and either ham, bacon, or sausage. It could be Manhattan's cheapest breakfast deal. Cons. Well, there's nowhere to sit, and the place is pretty bare bones, so it's nothing fancy. It's a hot dog, so temper your expectations for anything amazing. And while the breakfast is cheap, you'd probably get higher quality at your local bodega for an extra $1 or $2. Topping our list of famous eateries is Russ and Daughters. Open 110 years, this Lower East Side appetizing institution is a must visit. The pros. I don't know if I've ever had better Nova salmon or lox in the city. And you know how we talked about the experience of walking into Katz's? Well, going to Russ and Daughters is just as fun, grabbing a ticket and ordering from behind the counter. Well, $17 for a lox and cream cheese bagel is very pricey. This is the one place I would pay for it and not complain. They've managed to keep their standards high, plus Jewish appetizing stores of this nature are very hard to find these days. The location in the Lower East Side and the fact that they have a separate sit-down cafe around the corner makes this perfect for any visitor to New York who is willing to try something classic. Cons. Outside of the price and potential for lines, the biggest issue I have with Russ and Daughters are their bagels. Since they don't make them in-house, you're really not there for them. The star is the cured fish. I've even heard of some of my viewers getting some lox or other cured fish from Russ and Daughters and getting a bagel somewhere else to create the ultimate breakfast sandwich. New York is one of the most expensive destinations on the planet. It's very easy to spend here and very hard to keep your wallet closed. In this video, I'll share the 15 ways tourists keep wasting their money and how to avoid these common mistakes. Take some notes. Here we go. We're gonna start with something that shocks many of my foreign viewers. In fact, it's so common that I even tend to overspend on this myself. That's portion size of the food here. Many times you'll order food at restaurants and come to the realization that this is way too much food for one person. Perhaps we should have ordered less. With most Airbnbs being banned, you probably don't have a full-size fridge in your hotel and may end up throwing out or just wasting money on a ton of food here. I was out for my birthday just last week with Adriana and my son, and we ordered a large pie at an Italian restaurant, which was way too much for us. The portions here are no joke, but living here we have a fridge, so it's not a problem. It never hurts to ask your waiter, hey, is this better for sharing? How big is the portion? They're gonna be honest with you. And worst case, you can always order more food rather than stuffing yourself needlessly. The most common type of restaurant I see an issue with food portion size are the Jewish delis, the Katz's and the Sarges, when you order 2 sandwiches and realize this could have been enough. But then again, that's even more reason to walk around the city, and you'll do plenty of walking when you visit here. Arriving to New York and departing the city from the area airports is one of the most common ways I see my tourists overspending. I used to follow these Facebook groups, and so many of them would comment about these expensive car services doing pickup, which is great if you have a huge group and a ton of luggage or small children, but many people skip out on some easy, low-cost options of getting to Manhattan. Many times these are faster too because of traffic. Let's look at some comments you all sent me. Andrew and Kyla here. We always fly into LaGuardia, and we used to pay for a taxi to our hotel in Long Island City. The Q70 bus takes us to an MTA station that we use to take the subway the rest of the way. The method is essentially free. We buy unlimited 7-day subway passes and faster than a taxi due to the bus lanes from the airport. Thank you, Andrew and Kyla, for a great point. At LaGuardia Airport, there is a free bus that you can take, which will put you into the New York City subway system at Jackson Heights, and from there, it's just a subway swipe to get around the city. A great option. Although keep this in mind, LaGuardia does have the best prices to get to Midtown Manhattan, as it is the closest airport to there. Just got back, used the air train and LIRR for the first time, and saved loads over our usual yellow cab. Less than half the price and half the time. Be brave, people. Of all the tips I've ever shared on this channel, the advice about taking the Long Island Railroad from JFK Airport to Midtown is the one I constantly hear was the most helpful, because it's a no-brainer. For $5, you can get direct into Penn Station or into Grand Central in about 20 minutes. Now, the only caveat here is, again, if you have a ton of luggage, or if it's late at night, you're super tired, you don't want to deal with it, fine, spend the extra money on the Uber, the Revel, the car service, whatever that may be. If you want to specifically find out how it's done, watch our video on scams to avoid at the airport. We break down step by step how to get from JFK to Midtown. Buying anything from the gift shops between 8th and 5th Ave in Central Park South and 34th Street. I can't vouch for the gift shop prices at all stores in Midtown, but generally speaking, those ones do have the highest prices for obvious reasons. My wife and I, when we need souvenirs for visitors, when we're going abroad and we want to bring some New York City trinkets, we always shop on Canal Street near Chinatown. So I would say when you're going to Chinatown doing a little cheap eats crawl, save a little time for some souvenir shopping, and you will definitely get the best prices. And be wary of the knockoff goods and electronics. We just discussed those on my latest scam video. I do not recommend you purchase any of that stuff. Taking Ubers and taxis everywhere, a common way to overspend. Oof. One trip years ago, my friend was afraid to take the subway, so we took Ubers everywhere. Holy F, that added up. I put my foot down when we were in Chinatown, and we needed to head up to a Yankee game. That subway trip was smooth. Not using the subway the first days due to safety concerns. The subway was safe, fast, and easy to use. Wish I had used the subway more, spent way too much on Ubers and taxis. This is a very common occurrence. Tourists watch the news, they hear about some subway violence, and they vow never to set foot underground. And I just think that's a big mistake. You are gonna be forced to spend a fortune on Ubers and taxis. If you're taking those cars during normal business hours within Manhattan, the subway is almost always quicker to the main attractions. Manhattan is extremely connected by subway lines. If you're concerned about your safety and not familiar with the city, I'd recommend not taking the subway after 11 p.m. when there's a lot less people until the morning rush hour. You could also find the indication board, also known as the zebra board, so you know where the subway conductor is sitting for a little added safety, or just try to sit in more crowded subway cars. But don't discount the subway as a transportation method. It's gonna save you time, and it's definitely gonna save you money. Insisting on a meal with a view. Restaurants near Times Square or other tourist attractions. We purposely went to a restaurant with a view of Times Square so we could see it without being in it. Overpriced for meh food. We were paying for the view, but just a heads up, folks, we would rather spend that money on a really great dinner where the food was amazing, or just get a cocktail or dessert at a place like that and save the big dollars for elsewhere. I get this, you want that magical rooftop dining experience. Well, I've got news for you. New York City is more well known for rooftop bars, not rooftop restaurants. And if you're ordering food at a restaurant on a rooftop, the odds are very strong that the food is gonna be mediocre, because the food doesn't have to be good. People are there for the view, not for the food. So if you are looking for amazing food in New York, you'll find it at plenty of places without great views. And then if you must go to a rooftop, well, you can go to one of the 5 observation decks, or better yet, go to Beast and Butterflies on the rooftop of the M Social Hotel. I just went back there after many months, and I can see why so many of my viewers have tagged me there. That view is incredible of Times Square. I enjoyed my $9 Brooklyn Lager so much. They also allow children up there. Definitely one to keep in mind. One of my favorite topics, tipping. I love New York and spending, and yes, I definitely waste and overspend, but that's part of the experience. What I find really annoying is tipping for anything and everything, and tips being added to bills without even knowing it. I'm all for tipping for a service that I asked for. I just don't like the tipping culture. It makes me feel all interactions with people are false, and all they want is your money. I mean, it does feel that way sometimes, that all people in New York want is your money, but tipping is just something you have to accept here. I understand a lot of my viewers coming from Europe, from the UK, are not fans of the New York tipping system, but it is something that the locals deal with, and it's something you just have to accept. As far as overspending on this, I want to remind you that many tourist locations will give auto gratuities on your bill of 18 or 20%, in which case it's fine to leave the bill alone. Where you'd be in danger of overspending here is 1, leaving an additional tip on top of the auto gratuity, which is so easy to do if you don't read the check closely. 2, tipping too much on top of the overall bill. I personally tip 20% of the pre-tax total, not post-tax. Also, many times restaurants with terminals have gratuity options starting at 20%, going up to 30%, and you may feel pressured to leave a lot because the waiter's standing in front of you, but don't. And if you're more curious about the tipping culture in New York, I did an entire video dedicated to that subject. We're about to talk about one of New York's most common scams. Shop around when going to hot dog carts or any cart, TBH. One on one corner will sell a bottle of drink for $5, whilst the next down the block will sell the same bottle for $3. TBH, people say NYC is expensive, but we started splurging towards the end of our trip this year. Shop wisely. Now, I just saw a video of a first-time tourist spending $10 on a hot dog, and we have harped on this topic time and time again, and we're gonna continue to harp on it, and that is when you go to any street food cart, any vendor, and the prices are not listed, ask for the price before you order, okay? Because if you don't, and they get a sense that you're not from here, they may charge you whatever they want. I've seen vendors in Midtown selling water bottles for $5 when they should be $2, and if you're curious what a hot dog should actually cost you, around $3. I'm not trying to knock all the street food vendors in New York because most of them are honest, but I've heard about some deceptive practices in the Times Square area and around Central Park, so be careful. The hop-on, hop-off buses, these are widespread in every major city. I was never into these. I think for many people, they're not worth the money, which is what, 50 to 60 bucks a person. New York's the kind of city you need to experience walking. If you're on a bus, you're not gonna interact with any locals. There's gonna be no chance for you to wander into a shop or have a different experience than all the other tourists. And if it's super hot, super cold, raining, snowing, you may not wanna ride them. The touristy parts of New York are actually pretty compact. You can see most of the major sites of Manhattan in 3 full days if you plan your time properly. These buses just scratch the surface. There are exceptions. If you're a person with a disability that affects your mobility, they're great because sadly not every subway station is accessible. Or if you're traveling with the elderly, these could be a viable option. Otherwise, I would recommend a walking tour or just wandering neighborhoods versus the hop-on, hop-off buses. Paying full price for Broadway tickets. There are so many ways to save money on Broadway tickets that many tourists completely overlook. The last thing you want to do is just show up at a theater and buy tickets the day of. Many travelers know about lining up at the TKTS booth the day of a show to get good discounts, and yes, this is a tried and true method. There's also Broadway lotteries you can enter. Many are digital these days. This website puts the most popular ones together. Keep in mind there's typically a limit of only 2 tickets per entry for this. You can also aim to see the less popular shows, which many times on sites like StubHub have cheaper prices on the secondary market. But if you must see the hottest show during the Christmas season, there's almost no way around spending the kind of money that you would for a fancy steak dinner for it. Use some of those discount methods. And if you want to find out about more common mistakes that tourists make when they visit Broadway, check out this video we shot with a Broadway lifer. There are some incredible tips on here. Misusing attraction passes. I am not gonna call attraction passes a waste of money if you use them correctly. Let's take a step back. I'm referring to the passes that give you access to multiple observation decks, museums, and attractions in one day, or over the course of a few days. There's a few companies that sell them. If you do the math, you can save money. I do have issues with them. And the biggest is you're doing all the touristy stuff and having the same trip as everyone else. Some people don't mind that, and I respect it. The problem comes when you go buy an all-inclusive pass for 3 days for $259 and you don't go hopping around nonstop. My point is, figure out what you want to see, do the math, and see if it makes sense to buy one of the attraction passes. I don't think any tourist needs more than 1 observation deck on a trip. The queues can be long, and if the weather sucks, then you may not even have an enjoyable experience at it. Not checking restaurant prices before being seated. A restaurant might look nice from the outside, but unless you've read reviews or someone recommended it to you, take a look at the menu, a good look at the menu before walking in. Because once you're settled in at your table, the waiter has brought your water and bread already. It could be just a little awkward if there's some sticker shock, which is very common in New York, where the price of eating can be high, quite high. Expensive roaming charges. Don't just show up to New York without some kind of plan for your cell phone. If I were to fly to almost any country, my service, Verizon, would charge me a set roaming fee per day. Either check if your local carrier offers a cheap roaming option to the US, or better yet, use an eSIM, which you can install on your phone before you arrive. I've had great success with Olafly, who has partnered with us on the channel before. If you want to check out their plans with a 5% coupon code, see the link in the description, or use this QR code right here. I used Olafly all over Europe, had nothing but good experiences. Overpriced hotel stays. This one is pretty straightforward. If you want to book a hotel near Times Square during the holiday season, you will spend $400 to $700 a night, and there's very little you can do about it. Two ways to lessen the burden of hotel stays. One is to stay outside of the Midtown Manhattan bubble. Even lower Manhattan has better prices, but better yet, check downtown Brooklyn, check Long Island City, Queens, check even closer to the airport in Flushing. Number two, come during a non-peak period. Anywhere from January 10th to April 1st will likely get you a better price, and the tourist sites will be way less crowded too. And our last few winters have been pretty mild, so you could get lucky. This is a really good one. Eating out at every meal. Sometimes it's nice to just buy something from the supermarket and eat it in the park. While you may see me eating out all the time in the channel, that's because we're filming content and I need exciting stuff for you guys. But in truth, I don't go out to eat every day, maybe once or twice a week when I'm not filming. That's because eating out nonstop in New York will put a dent in your wallet faster than almost anything. If you can find a Trader Joe's or even a deli, a bodega, go buy a salad or a sandwich and sit at one of the city's many parks for breakfast or lunch once in a while. We actually do have a great culture of quick-serve, grab-and-go food spots at pretty reasonable prices. A few slices of pizza work equally well, or have the most New York breakfast possible, walk into a bodega and order a bacon, egg, and cheese, salt, pepper, ketchup. Do it just like that, and they might even think you live here. Carriage rides in Central Park. I am not a fan of these at all. There's been some bad stories out there about some of the suffering of the horses, and it's about $65 for 20 minutes, not counting tip. Do an hour, and you're basically paying your airfare here. I think a better deal would be booking a pedicab in advance. Now, there's some really popular ones. You can read the reviews. I hear about this Frankie Legs guy all the time. He's probably worth investigating. And don't ever jump blindly onto a pedicab because they charge between $3 to $9 a minute. Do the math on that for a 30-minute ride. And if you don't like any of those options, there's plenty of much cheaper walking tours out there.
The worst fear of any traveler is spending an entire trip surrounded by swarms of other tourists, feeling like you're having the same trip as everybody else. Today I'll be sharing some New York neighborhoods that are gonna give you more local vibes and still have a ton of things to do. Use this guide to make your next trip here feel a little bit more authentic. Here we go. This first neighborhood is so close to the belly of the beast that is Times Square, and yet just far enough away where you won't be hounded by Disney characters, and it's Hell's Kitchen. Just a 10-minute walk from Times Square. I think the best reason to visit here is 9th Ave, which is one of the most underrated areas in the city to find good food. They have diverse offerings like Peruvian, Spanish, Venezuelan, so much more. And heck, they're even home to one of my favorite bars, Rudy's, where you can get a free hot dog with every beer. But I really love it because you can just walk around some of the blocks and find a little bit more of a relaxed vibe and even some brownstones that would give you Brooklyn vibes. Sometimes the best neighborhoods for savvy travelers are just outside of those crowded central areas. And you'll find more New York local options with fewer chains, no Olive Gardens, and much better prices. I also recommend searching this area for a pre or post Broadway meal. And if you haven't visited Schmackery's Cookies yet, you better hit them up. One of the best cookies I've ever tried living in New York. And just a note for everybody watching, I will have links in the description to every single neighborhood mentioned if you want a more in-depth guide to them. I have yet to visit a single neighborhood anywhere on the planet that can match this one for affordability and diversity of food choices, and that's Jackson Heights, Queens, just 30 minutes from Midtown Manhattan on the 7 train, but it's like stamping your passport. You can sample anything from Paraguayan sandwiches to Tibetan momos, the only Bhutanese food truck in New York, and the best Mexican food you may just find on the East Coast of the US. Jackson Heights is a foodie's paradise, and it's just starting to get attention from tourists. If you're a little hesitant about exploring without a local, my good friend Greg, who's a mainstay on the channel, offers food tours there, and many of my viewers have told me it was the highlight of their trip. I don't think you can really say you've been in New York unless you hit up some of these amazing immigrant-owned businesses for food. The Upper West West Side. Now, this is a neighborhood that many of you may find yourselves in without really realizing it. It's home to the American Museum of Natural History and Central Park. But if you walk just a few blocks away, you've got a great neighborhood that was even home to the fictional characters from Seinfeld. There's so many iconic places to eat there, like Gray's Papaya, probably the most legendary hot dog shop in New York City, or Barney Greengrass, an old school Jewish deli that doesn't get anywhere near the attention it deserves. Anthony Bourdain was even a huge fan. Even just wandering the beautiful streets after visiting Central Park is worth it. And if you want to see a local park that gets way less attention than Central, head over to Riverside Park. One of the city's best bagels, as far as I'm concerned, is located near Columbia Absolute Bagels. And you are absolutely missing out if you don't visit the Upper West Side, which is truly one of the crown jewel neighborhoods of the city, as far as I'm concerned. While most tourists cross the Brooklyn Bridge and stay in a small area of Dumbo, I encourage you to walk up the hill 10 minutes to Brooklyn Heights. For one, you've got million-dollar views of Manhattan from the Brooklyn Bridge Promenade, which I think is one of Brooklyn's best-kept secret viewpoints. Seriously, I could just sit there for hours. Speaking of million-dollar views, you've got multi-million-dollar brownstones galore, and I'd call this the most beautiful neighborhood in all of New York City. And while it's not really known as a foodie destination, there's enough interesting spots like Della Rocco's for you to spend some time there. If you want a little taste of brownstone Brooklyn, Brooklyn Heights is by far the best spot for a tourist to check out. Make sure to bring your camera. Many of my Chinese American friends tell me that the Chinatown in Flushing, Queens is the superior one. And while you can't knock Chinatown Manhattan's central location, if you're willing to trek out to Flushing, you'll be eating in an area that probably has the best Asian eats in the whole city. Chinese, Taiwanese, Korean, and more. It's also more local. I have visited eateries that don't even have English on the menu. So if you're in the mood for a food adventure, I highly recommend it. And check out our entire Chinatown series linked down in the description for even more specific picks of restaurants there. Few neighborhoods have the history and culture of Harlem in Upper Manhattan. I can't think of many places with better soul food in the city. If it's your first time in New York, definitely consider a walking tour. Free Tours by Foot has a great one that I've even taken years ago. I think Harlem gets a lot of attention internationally, but it's overlooked by many locals. From beautiful brownstones on Strivers Row to lots of food options, it's a must visit. And if you're into jazz music, Harlem has some very famous spots that play well into the night. Another really popular activity is seeing a gospel choir live. This is a neighborhood any tourist needs to have on their radar. A lot of my younger viewers will flock to Williamsburg for its trendy nightlife and hipster scene, but I think Greenpoint, which is located just north, is equally as interesting. They've got Peter Pan Donuts, which may be the best donut I've ever tried in the city, and the waterfront views are nothing to sleep on. But perhaps my favorite thing about Greenpoint is the large contingent of Polish restaurants. I have never had a pierogi as good as the one that I ate at Pirojik. And Greenpoint has multiple Polish restaurants for you to check out. You could spend an entire day doing it. It's also got a lot of nightlife, and if you're looking for an alternative to all the crowds in Williamsburg, Greenpoint really checks off all the boxes as far as I'm concerned. We're gonna cheat a little bit with this one because even though it feels like it's in New York, Hoboken is actually right across the Hudson River in New Jersey. Just a 10-minute path ride from Greenwich Village. It's worth it alone for those jaw-dropping views of the Manhattan skyline. But it's also worth exploring Frank Sinatra's hometown a little further. There's plenty of good dining and delis to choose from, and the little streets without the crowds of Manhattan make Hoboken feel a little bit like a tucked-away oasis. Take it from somebody that grew up in Jersey, Hoboken is worth the trip. While Coney Island gets most of the tourist attention in South Brooklyn, I'm a much bigger fan of Brighton Beach, also known as Little Odessa. It's an interesting mix of immigrants from the former Soviet Union and the many local businesses they've established. If you're looking for pierogies and borscht, you've come to the right spot. How many neighborhoods of New York will you find random babushkas selling trinkets in the street. The boardwalk is also really neat to explore, to see live musicians, or just enjoy the ocean breeze off the Atlantic. And while I wouldn't call it a great beach for swimming, Brighton Beach packs a serious punch for the tourist who really wants to get to feel the cultural diversity that is New York. Make sure to stay tuned till the end. I'm gonna throw in one bonus neighborhood. Bushwick is one of New York's most unique neighborhoods to visit as a tourist. Its collection of graffiti in the Bushwick Collective and the surrounding blocks will give you a little taste of some local art. I also love all the vintage stores and thrift shops. My wife Adriana and I have gone shopping there in the past, just looking for some cool finds. It's also a real hub for nightlife. If you want to avoid the pretentious clubs in Manhattan, House of Yes, for example, is an incredible venue for any out-of-towner to check out. Or if you're looking for something more low-key, there's plenty of hip dive bars and a ton of spots to get some good craft beer. For my viewers under 30 or those just young at heart, Bushwick has so much to offer. One bonus for you all, Long Island City, Queens. If you get a chance to visit Long Island City, not to be confused with Long Island, the waterfront at Gantry Plaza is one of my favorites in the entire city. With unobstructed views of Manhattan and it's 75% less crowded than Dumbo, it's a fun way to spend an hour or two. And the neighborhood has some serious good eats if you know where to look. It's Queens' most expensive neighborhood for a reason and just a few minutes away from Manhattan.
Is New York losing its magic for tourists? We'll talk about the shocking rise in crime at a popular tourist spot, jaw-dropping hotel prices, and a growing list of everyday struggles. Is New York still worth the trip? Let's discuss. One indisputable fact about visiting this city in 2024 and going forward is the rising cost of everything, starting with your hotel room. The New York Times just came out with a story about why NYC hotel rooms are so expensive right now. The average daily rate for a hotel stay in New York increased to $301 in 2023. I can only imagine where they're at in 2024, and there's so many factors involved, but the big three that this article cites are migrant shelters, the loss of Airbnb short-term rentals, and the decline in new hotel construction. Let's start with hotels being converted into migrant shelters, which is good business for many hotels. About 135 of the city's roughly 680 hotels entered the shelter program, with many congregated in Midtown Manhattan, Long Island City and Queens, and near Kennedy International Airport, all traditional magnets for tourists. Participating hotels are paid up to $185 a night per room according to the city. Not a single one is converted back into a traditional hotel. The use of city hotels for migrants represents a loss of 16,532 hotel rooms, leaving 121,000 rooms for travelers. That's 2,812 fewer hotel rooms than existed in the period just before the pandemic, a shortage that is being acutely felt. I mean, this is simple supply and demand. Less supply, more demand, prices are definitely going to go up. Since migrants are mostly taking up the city's more affordable hotels, mid-market tourists are most likely to see the steepest increase in prices. I really believe it's enabled 2- and 2.5-star hotels to be a little bit more emboldened to take advantage of the situation and charge prices that perhaps they otherwise wouldn't be able to. Now, it would be unfair to completely blame the migrant crisis for the increase in hotel room prices. There's another factor that's definitely at play, and that's almost the complete ban of Airbnbs for short-term stays in New York. The number of Airbnb listings in New York City for stays under 30 days plummeted by 83% to just 3,705 apartments in March 2024, down from 22,247 in August 2023. Now, according to Mayor Adams, the city is just so popular that, yeah, prices are gonna remain high. In a statement, a spokeswoman for Mr. Adams attributed the rise in hotel rates to the increase in tourism. About 62.2 million people visited the city last year, just below the record of 66.6 million in 2019. The return of tourists to New York City is reflected at hotels as well, where demand is up. New York City is safer, cleaner, and as the numbers show, continues to be one of the most popular destinations in the United States. There's another factor at play that really wasn't touched upon in the article, and that's inflation, which is affecting the entire United States and heck, the entire world. There was 2 articles written recently about Disney. Families are going into debt for Disney vacations. Is a Disney theme park vacation still worth the price? I wanted to see just how bad it was in Times Square to book a room for next month. I went into booking.com and I put a week in late September, the 22nd to 29th, and the cheapest room I found was $383 a night at the Pod Times Square. Now granted, it is a busy time of year to visit, but it's not a peak period. And honestly, I'm not such a fan of booking a hotel stay there, especially if you have a family, because later on in the video, we'll discuss some unsavory quality of life issues that are going on in that area. Now the guide in me has a few suggestions, one of which is to book as far in advance as possible. Also, play with the dates. Look, we have 3 area airports here. I think it's just as important, if not more important, to get your hotel booked first rather than the flight, because getting a good hotel deal in New York can be pretty tricky. Now, for example, I put 1 week later and I put the hotel in downtown Brooklyn, which is about 30 minutes from Midtown, and I saw a deal for $247 a night. Not super cheap, but cheaper. Of course, the further away from Midtown you go, the cheaper it will get. You can look at Long Island City, Queens, you can look at Flushing, Queens. A lot of other areas of the city will save you money. But it's those hotels in Midtown which just drive up the costs and why it makes New York look just so unaffordable.
There's been a lot of negative media coverage about a famous attraction in the city, and that's Central Park and robberies. Let's read this headline. 3 teens in custody, 1 sought in Central Park mugging as robberies up 200%. A group of teens are in police custody after allegedly mugging 3 people in Central Park. It happened around 1 a.m. Tuesday at Grand Army Plaza at 59th and 5th. The suspects approached the victims with one apparently motioning, simulating they had a gun. They're accused of mugging 3 victims ages 35, 21, and 15 of their AirPods and a chain. Now, arrests were made in this case. 2 of the 3 young suspects arrested in a robbery in Grand Army Plaza in Central Park early Tuesday are residing in city-run migrant shelters, one of them at the Row Hotel. Now, being such an iconic location, you know that the city is going to step up patrols, and the NYPD has a lot of surveillance going on in this area, particularly now between 7 to 11 p.m. Outside of the extra police presence, Mayor Adams said they might even implement drones to increase patrols. Mayor Adams on Tuesday acknowledged the troubling numbers and said they're looking at new technology like drones and they will roll it out when the time is right. When something happens in Central Park, it becomes a huge international story. We are on top of it, and the commissioner is responding accordingly, Adams said. All right, let's take a big step back. Don't go canceling your Central Park plans just yet. Robberies are up 200% in Central Park this year, with 30 reported versus 10 at this point last year. While robberies are up 200%, that's 30 total robberies versus 10 last year, 20 extra. This park gets 42 million visitors a year, so do some math on that. What I would encourage you to do is not come here after dark, especially if you're a tourist. Be aware of your surroundings and, don't get lulled into a false sense of security just because this park is so beautiful. There's a specific avenue in Midtown right now that is getting all sorts of negative tension due to some quality of life issues, and that's 8th Ave, just a few minutes from Times Square. Let's start with this New York Post article. Midtown Manhattan's 8th Ave corridor plagued by junkies lying at tourists' feet, fighting in the streets. A stretch of Midtown Manhattan has become a strip of despair where smacked-out addicts shoot up, light up, and conk out at the feet of commuters and tourists. I see a lot of things around here, one shop owner told the Post, of the so-called 8th Avenue corridor near Penn Station, where there's a cluster of addiction clinics and homeless shelters. Fights, drugs, oh my God, bad things. The latest stats from the NYPD show the Midtown South Precinct, which stretches from 9th Ave to Lexington, has some of the highest drug arrest numbers in the city, rivaling Harlem and the South Bronx. There have been at least 423 drug-related arrests in the 2 square miles of the Midtown South Precinct so far this year, an increase of roughly 100 busts over the same period last year. Thank you to the NYC Walking Show for letting me use clips from his recent video to illustrate what's going on. And I think that comes as no shock to people that have lived in New York for a long time, or even many tourists who walk the stretch between Port Authority to Penn Station. Look, it's always been grimy there. It's getting worse. I think that the whole country, big cities in the US in general, are having major issues with homelessness right now and mental health. Being prepared for that when you walk that strip is the best thing that I can say. If you see some unsavory behavior going on, don't be afraid to turn around or cross the street.
You know how we've talked about rip-off pedicab drivers on the channel? Well, it's far worse than I originally thought. This is from the New York Post. Out-of-control NYC pedicab drivers terrorize tourists, locals, and even sexually assault their own customers. They're like piranhas. Over the past few years, the driver's behavior has grown increasingly lawless, from blasting loud music and charging outrageous prices to brawling with customers and launching cartel-like attacks on competitors. The outlaw antics are reflected in a surge in pedicab-related criminal summonses, with cops issuing 1,493 violations through June 30th, a 51% spike from the 985 written during the same period in 2023. I'm not gonna bore you with the details here. Apparently, there was at least one sexual assault. There was also reports of them fighting some customers who didn't want to pay the exorbitant prices, and even fighting some carriage drivers. I am not trying to make a blanket statement that all pedicab drivers are bad, because they are definitely not. There are some great tour guides who have pedicabs. What I'm always encouraging you to do is not to hop blindly into one that is blasting techno music to try to get that tourist experience, because if you want to act like a tourist, they're going to charge you like a tourist. According to this article, up to $25 a minute. So always negotiate a price first if you want to do a tour with them. Remember that. So I actually polled you guys, the audience, and asked, has the negative publicity surrounding New York right now affected your decision to take a trip here? Or if you took a trip here recently, was there anything odd that you saw that you maybe wouldn't come back? Now, the vast majority of you said you would return. Cost is my only prohibitor. I felt 100% safe as a single traveling female with another single female, with my 12-year-old daughter, with my daughter, and another female. I was just in NYC for the weekend, stayed near Penn Station, walked everywhere, took LIRR out to the Mets game, at late night pizza, never once felt unsafe. I've been to NYC many times over the years, including this year. I've walked the streets at all hours of the day and night and never felt unsafe. I am sick to death of a social media and right-wing media fear-mongering based on political agenda. And then this comment touched on something I didn't even think of. The one negative that was unexpected and something I did not experience on my previous 2 trips to NYC is the sheer number of tourists that are seemingly everywhere in New York. For example, we gave up on trying to get the Staten Island ferry because it was so overcrowded. On my last visit, the ferry was only half full. When I took it, it was impossible to move around Times Square. Roosevelt Island tramcar was also swarming with tourists, and those stuck in the middle pretty much saw nothing. I know there's over-tourism in many places in Europe. I believe there's also over-tourism in NYC. I actually want to touch on that. When you visit New York during a peak period, like the summer, that could happen. Partially due to people like me. Also, there's hundreds of short-form influencers on TikTok and Instagram. So basically any free site or cheap site in Manhattan is probably going to be very crowded, so expect that. Then we got some responses, as I expected, about the costs. I just went to NYC end of last month. My main concern, of course, was cost of a trip. I had originally planned a big group trip so we could all split the cost of a hotel room, but only 2 of us ended up going. Even though we stayed in Jersey City, the cost ended up being $900 a person, and that was just for the hotel. For context, I spent a week in Texas doing all of the major cities and spent $900 on all combined hotel rooms. Just booked my 11th trip to NYC. The only thing that's getting worse is costs, but that's everywhere in the world the same. That's the truth. Know coming in that this city is very expensive, and start saving as early as possible. No matter what the media says, New York is still extremely popular, and there are droves and droves of tourists coming in and a limited amount of hotel rooms. This was a really good comment. Hi John, I just visited New York City at the end of July and wanted to add my 2 cents. I grew up in Ukraine and I'm currently living in the Middle East. I was visiting New York alone for 4 days until my husband arrived. I was really surprised by the number of homeless people and those with erratic behavior on the streets. I didn't walk alone after 8 p.m., but it was unpleasant to see this. I saw a lady being harassed in the subway by some weird dude once. Nothing happened to me, and thanks to your videos, I stayed out of trouble. All right, I think this is probably one of the biggest shocks of visiting the United States and big cities, the amount of homelessness and issues with mental health that you are likely to see during your trip. If you know this coming in and you expect to see it, I think it's gonna be a lot easier to digest. I don't have the answers to what the city could do to make this better. I wish I did. I think there's a lot of people who are still trying to figure that out and what they can do. The biggest complaint I actually got from recent tourists was the marijuana smell. Relatively local, right over the bridge in Jersey, but I don't like taking my kids into Manhattan anymore because of the constant weed smell in the air. The weed smoke drives me crazy. I've got no problem if people want to use marijuana, but the way that it can be so inconsiderately used in public is a negative for me in NYC. Just spent 6 days in New York, used the subway every day with my family. Occasional crazy, but that's everywhere. Felt safe everywhere. Only thing really stood out was a smell of marijuana everywhere. You gotta be prepared for that. If you're walking through Midtown Manhattan, if you're walking through Washington Square Park, odds are high you're gonna smell marijuana at least once, probably more. Not everyone who watches my channel does want to come to New York right now. Planning a retirement trip to Tokyo and Japan instead of New York. I got bad feedback from a couple of friends who said New York was dirty, overpriced, and felt dangerous. Would still like to visit New York in the future, but not in the next few years. Was booked to visit next February from the UK, have canceled and booked a week in Orlando instead due to the increased crime issues, felt safe visiting back in 2017 and 2018, but not anymore. It's just too expensive. We visited New York twice last year before Airbnb was outlawed. Now $2,000 will only get you flight tickets, 2 nights at a hotel, and airport transfer. It's just ridiculous. This year we drive to the mountains or to the ocean. One weekend is around $500 or less. I think some of the results are skewed in my comments because as a channel that's generally positive about New York, people that want to visit here are going to watch and they're going to be the ones leaving comments. To circle back to the intro, is New York still worth it to visit even with all of these issues? I think if you do your homework, if you come in with your eyes wide open and you know what to expect, then I think you could have a great trip. But if you last visited here before the pandemic, you come back to the city, some things are definitely going to be different. If you use street smarts, common sense, you should have a fine time. But I'll repeat it, New York is not for everybody. But if you love big cities and all that come with it, at least as far as the United States is concerned, New York is impossible to top. Visiting New York can be intimidating for first-timers, and there's certain unspoken rules and customs that newbies tend to break many times without realizing it. In this video, we'll share all of them and even a few bonuses so your next trip here is free from any embarrassing or possibly expensive mistakes. As a tourist, you are far more likely to get hit by a bike than you are by a car. In my 13 years living in New York, I have never come close to being hit by a car, and 2 or 3 times I almost got hit by a bike, and I wasn't even walking in the bike lane. Always be aware of where the bike lanes are in the city because the cyclists already have a chip on their shoulder for so many cars and pedestrians ignoring this. If you stand here and try to take a photo or just don't pay attention to it, best case scenario, you're gonna get a warm New York City welcome and learn a few new curse words. Worst case scenario, you are gonna get crashed into and it is gonna be very painful. And this video is not sponsored by any kind of travel insurance, so you just don't wanna get into that. So sometimes it's a little bit tricky to find, but the easiest way to find the bike lane is to look down like this and you can see it, or better yet, see where all the cyclists are heading. But never ever stand in the middle of this. This drives locals crazier than anything and is one of the main reasons they love to avoid the Times Square area, and that's traffic flow and how to walk properly on a congested city street. Now this actually takes a little bit of effort if, let's say, you have 4 people in your group. What you don't want to do is walk all 4 across because you are going to be stopping all the people behind you from walking around. You need to be in groups of 2 maximum. And right now, Times Square is not that busy because it's February, but if you're here during a peak period, you will understand exactly what I mean. And this advice goes for all of New York. And what you never ever want to do is stop in the middle of the sidewalk to take a photo or to look for directions. That is the quickest way to get New Yorkers angry at you. And later on in this video, we're going to talk about some similar concepts underground on the subway. I'm going to share a firsthand experience that occurred about a month ago when I went to MJ the Musical, and this is about Broadway etiquette. Now, I was surrounded by many tourists, and halfway through the show, there were about 2 teens sitting next to Adriana and I, and they started to play with their phones in the middle of the show. And let me tell you, when it's super dark in a theater and somebody's looking at their phone, it is completely distracting and disrespectful. And shame on those parents for not realizing what was going on. The big unspoken rule here is do not play with your phone during a Broadway show. And if you're a parent, make sure that your children have the attention span to sit through an entire performance or find out if there's an intermission or not to avoid situations like that. And if you need even more Broadway tips and tricks, check out the video we shot with a Broadway insider giving you the lowdown. Carmine's Fine Italian Dining, which brings me to tipping, which is something that so many tourists get frustrated with visiting New York. It is such a source of complaint that I've even dedicated an entire video to this foreign American concept of tipping. But the number one spot I hear about tourists having problems is not even at restaurants, it's at bars, because you are dealing directly with the bartender, and if you do not leave a tip for your drink, you're gonna hear about it. My general rule of thumb is tip $1 per drink, some say $2 per cocktail. The bartender will be much nicer to you as well. A simple rule for restaurants, tip 20% of the pre-tax total on the bill, assuming your service was good enough. You know, look, I understand the frustration out there because in many other countries, servers are paid living wages, but in the United States, they live off of tips. And while I might not personally be a fan of it, I still adhere to it because when you visit another city, another country, you have to do as the locals do. Something brand new in New York, if you are ordering Uber Eats or DoorDash delivery to your hotel, they have pretty much cut out tipping. This is a recent change where they've just raised fees. Now they have a screen where they only suggest a $1, $2, or $3 tip after the order has been delivered. And I know many New Yorkers now who just don't tip anymore on these apps because the drivers are getting $30 an hour and the fees, well, they've gone up. The weather, every New Yorker's favorite topic. Take it from me as somebody that films outdoors all the time and relies on weather reports daily to know when to film. The weather in New York City is extremely volatile. First of all, Manhattan, you are never far from the water, so you could catch yourself walking on a street that just has a crazy amount of wind and it'll feel 10 to 15 degrees cooler. So I'd say between November even to April, sometimes even into May, having a light jacket with you, a sweater, always a good idea. Another thing is the rain. I try my hardest not to film when it's raining. Even last week, at the last minute, rain popped up into the forecast and we had some of it for about 2 to 3 hours and I was completely unprepared. Having an umbrella with you at all times, never a bad idea. An unspoken rule that every New Yorker knows so well many times from bad experiences is never accept anything when you're walking, especially in Midtown Manhattan. This is how the majority of the scams that we've covered on this channel occur. Don't say yes to a monk handing you a bracelet, to somebody handing you a CD, to a pamphlet, to somebody holding a clipboard. Just keep your eyes locked ahead, avert your gaze. That's the best advice I can give anybody in New York. And if you need even more advice on avoiding scams in the city, watch the whole video we have dedicated to it. Supporting local businesses. I know how easy it is when you travel to go to franchises like Dunkin' Donuts behind me, to grab a coffee when you're in a rush, rather than going to one of the local street carts and getting a coffee from a vendor that really relies on the income more. Being a New Yorker, and I think visiting New York, is all about supporting small local businesses like that, and I encourage you to go out of your way to do so. And supporting local businesses is definitely something that'll really make your trip to New York a lot more memorable. In some cultures, it's just commonplace for locals to stare at you. Well, in New York, it is the complete opposite. Minding your own business is something that native New Yorkers especially know all about. So if you see somebody acting erratic, doing weird things, don't stare, don't point at them, just don't get involved. Because if you look at somebody, it could be a trigger for a confrontation, or worse, a signal that you even want to fight. So make sure that you do not stare at strangers here, and don't get involved in conflict here unless you absolutely have no other choice. And don't take a picture with a Hulk and expect him to not charge you 20 bucks for it. Don't take an Uber or a taxi when you can take the subway to get there faster. And don't take the subway when it's quicker and easier to walk. This unspoken rule is broken all the time. Now, I would say if you're considering taking an Uber or a taxi between the hours of 7:30 a.m. to 8 p.m., it's almost always faster to take the subway inside of Manhattan, and a lot cheaper. Let me give you a good example. If I'm at Grand Central and I want to get down to Battery Park, you could take the Express 4 or 5 and get there in 13 minutes 5 stops. That same Uber ride is gonna take you 25 minutes, probably more with traffic, and cost you $30 to $40 versus the $2.90 you would pay taking the subway. Manhattan is so well connected by subway that this example holds true in almost any way you could think of between Midtown to Lower Manhattan. And when it comes to walking during peak hours when traffic is terrible, don't even think about hailing a taxi. And even sometimes waiting for the subway could be 10 minutes or more. If it's crowded, walking down the steps is all gonna eat up your time. And if you could just walk 15 to 20 minutes, I always advise walking, unless the weather's bad. And since you're gonna be riding the subway underground, there's some unspoken rules we definitely have to go over. Let me repeat this for the 10th time on the channel. You do not need to buy a Metro card anymore. It is now official. Even at JFK Airport, the AirTrain supports OmniPay, which is contactless payment from your phone or even from a card with a chip. Now, my wife's brother was visiting from Mexico recently and he was asking me all about this, and I said, as long as you have this enabled in any way, shape, or form, a Metro card is completely useless to you right now. All you need to do is tap your phone or tap your card and you're in. Buying a Metro card, I think it's just an extra step right now. Look, you don't need a Metro card. The Metro card machines even tell you you don't need a Metro card anymore. Right from the horse's mouth, okay? So when you're going up an escalator in a subway station in the city, always stay to the right, because if people are in a rush, they're late for a meeting, they're late for court, I don't know what, they want this lane here open. Do not stand to the left unless you are walking quickly. Another unspoken rule broken all the time, and it's really just courtesy, is when people are getting out of the subway, do not block the doors. Stand to the side, let them exit, and then go in. And you would be surprised how often I see people breaking this simple rule, even locals. The subway intercom is likely gonna sound like a toddler babbling right when you need it most, or the train track noise like this is gonna make it impossible to hear what the next stop is. Always be paying attention to how many stops you have left if you don't know the city well. Even a few weeks ago, I missed my stop because I zoned out. It happens to everybody. Don't rely on the conductor's voice unless it's clear like that. If the subway is super crowded during rush hour, one advanced tactic is what I'll call pre-walking, is when your station is approaching, standing up and moving towards the door. Because if you wait till the last second, you could run into a sea of people flooding onto the train right as you want to get out. So if you have the time, get up right as your stop is approaching on a busy, busy train. Respecting neighborhoods, and this goes beyond the obvious, like not littering. I'm also talking about your volume and your noise if you're going out at night and going to bars. Now, I used to live at that apartment right there in Greenwich Village for almost a decade, and I can tell you that on weekends, the volume from outside was enough to wake you up unless you had a fan or white noise going, and people would sometimes even open up our garbage area to use the bathroom. That being said, always paying attention when you're out and not being super noisy on the street late at night is going to be very considerate of you when there's people sleeping who have to go to work the next day. Another unspoken rule is if you are going to celebrity houses or even places where celebrities used to live, like Richard Gere's old townhouse behind me, which sold for over $10 million in 2007. If you're a huge Richard Gere fan, you can take a photo of it, that's fine, but don't peer into the windows, don't open the gate, don't stand on their stoops. Realize that people live here and be respectful of that. Richard Gere lived there, Sandra Bullock, Anne Wintour from Vogue is somewhere here. I lived on the poor side of the street. Let's talk fast serve restaurant etiquette, and I'm actually standing in front of my old deli here in the Village. If you go to a deli, a bodega, a pizza spot, and there's a long line, make sure you know your order before you get to the front. Step out of line if you have to, because if you're gonna be asking the worker 50 questions while there's 30 hungry construction workers behind you, you're gonna be in for some trouble. That is one thing, respecting people's time. If it's busy, check the menu first. I'm gonna throw one more bonus tip out there. If you're at a small, casual eatery, let's give an example, Fuzhou Cuisine in Chinatown. They don't have a ton of tables and they're always super busy. What you don't wanna do is sit there after your meal for 20 minutes just chatting if people are waiting for tables. If you're at a finer dining establishment, take your time. They'll let you know if they need the table. But if you're at a small casual place, see if people are waiting for tables and don't sit there and chat for 30 minutes after. And this is something that goes against a lot of cultures. I know even my wife in Mexico loves to do what's called sobremesa after her meal, sit there and chat. You can't do it at all New York eateries, especially popular ones where people need the tables. If you're not from the US, especially Latin America or Europe, listen closely. A lot of tourists run into issues with ordering alcohol. Now, one mistake they make is not bringing ID with them if they look anything under 30. I even sometimes get ID'd. If you go to a restaurant and you order a beer, have either your local ID with you or your passport, just in case. And that advice goes for bars and clubs. Almost every bar in the city, IDs, no matter how old you look. Now, something cool about New York versus where I grew up in northern New Jersey is you can buy beer at CVS, you can buy beer at bodegas, you can buy beer at delis. And at a lot of them, you can even buy single beers from a six-pack, which isn't that common everywhere else in the US. New York City has some absolutely iconic food, and today, that's all I'm gonna be eating. We'll show you New York's best bagels, hot dogs, pastrami, and more. Get ready for the ultimate NYC food tour. And this video is filmed in order, so you can literally turn this into a bucket list New York City food adventure if you want. The bagel, the breakfast icon of New York City, brought here by Polish Jewish immigrants at the turn of the 20th century. Is there a more New York City breakfast than this? Debatable. Well, you can tell they mean business when 12:30 on a Monday, there's already a super long line. An absolute, I've heard from so many, is the best bagel in New York City. And this is the only spot in the video I've never been to. So let's find out. Oh, those look so good. It's passing the visual test. How are you? Could I get an everything bagel with scallion cream cheese, please? No, thank you. All right, let's investigate. This is the story of my life. Line dies the second we head out. Everyone in New York generally thinks where they're from has the best bagels. Their neighborhood spot is the best, and I've heard about Absolute for years. Finally, gonna be trying this legendary bagel here in Morningside Heights. You know, didn't see a single tourist in line. It was like all Columbia students. All right, let's try this. This looks amazing. Chewy on the outside, soft on the inside. This is how a New York bagel has to be. Wow. All these years living in the city, a dozen years, I never tried Absolute. People push me all the time to try it, but I'm glad I finally came. That first impression, instantly this is going towards the top of my list for New York City bagels. We're eating so much food today that I did not want to get lox, any of their salmon choices, the appetizing stuff. I want to try that at some point, but I have to tell you, I'm struggling right now to think of a better bagel I've ever had in New York. Bold statement coming. I think this is the best bagel I've ever had in New York City. I would put this in a textbook for a New York City bagel. And a very important note for you all, cash only. I saw people running out, telling their friends, oh, go to the ATM machine. There was a little bit of confusion with that, but they don't take pre-orders, they don't do delivery. They do one thing, they do it well, bagels, cash only, and I mean, they have that right. They've earned it, in my opinion. Absolute bagels, absolutely recommended. What a start to this iconic New York City food tour. Is there anything more iconic in cinema than somebody grabbing a street hot dog in the city? Well, we've got Billy's here, and the story with him is we included him in our best reviewed hot dog video last year, and his hot dog stand really blew up in international popularity. YouTube channels covered him. A lot of my viewers from all over the world said he was fantastic. Let's go pay him a visit and see if he remembers us. Love it. Always a line. Billy is a local legend.
I've been coming to him since I was mid-30s.
Oh, wow.
I'm 67 years old.
30 years, huh? Best in the city.
Well, he's always here, reliable.
Yeah. People have been coming to this guy for decades. Remember me? Best reviewed hot dogs in New York City?
You started again, you see?
We're doing different spots. Hot dogs, pastrami, like the best of each category, and your hot dog. You deserve it, man. You deserve it.
Billy's been here over 30 years.
Oh, yeah. But you do a great job, man. So I just want to thank you.
You do good too.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you good too.
You got a hard job, man. You got the whole neighborhood here, you know.
Your wife was pregnant, no?
Yeah.
Okay, you got the baby?
Yes, sir. Here he is, 6 months.
Yeah.
He's a big boy. You're right, she was pregnant. He tried your hot dog while still in the womb. Anything you want to say to the people?
Nah, listen, say thanks to everybody.
That's all. Thank you so much, Billy.
All right. Okay, guys.
I'll see you soon. This is the best, man. Heading to Central Park, 2 Billy's hot dogs. Doesn't get much better than this. Billy does his hot dogs good, I'm telling you. This is not your average dirty water dog in New York City. He puts a lot of love into this. We have his onion sauce and some mustard. Real simple, $2 each. Nice snap. Love the onion sauce. It's just a little bit of kick. Now, of course, you come here for the hot dog. You come here for a good hot dog, but what you're really coming for is somebody who's been in the neighborhood for well over 30 years, for decades. And when you go there, even if you're not from New York City, you're gonna feel like you're from New York City. He talks to everybody. He'll ask where you're from. He'll ask how your day is going. You wanna feel like a local for just a little bit, even if you're not, come to Billy's Hot Dogs and then head to Central Park. Why not combine the two? Do Central Park right after. The location's absolutely perfect and the hot dogs, really good as well.
If you love New York food and want a really cool gift, consider shopping at the online store my wife and I run over on Etsy. She's got stickers, prints, and a whole lot more at really affordable prices, ships worldwide. See the link in the description.
The Jewish Deli, a New York institution. My viewers constantly ask me, where do you get a good pastrami sandwich? I always point them as Sarge's over Katz's for a more local experience. I love this spot. Want to do the number 3 corned beef and pastrami? Always get that, like every time. And a Doc Brown's celery. Many people say just get a pastrami. I like to mix up the two when I come to Sarge's. So we have rye bread on top of coleslaw Russian dressing. Then we have some of the fatter pastrami on top of the leaner corned beef. So this is the ultimate Jewish deli sandwich in New York City right here. You're probably gonna need a fork and knife. I'm gonna attempt to get at least a few bites before this thing topples over. It's so rich, so tender in flavor. If you just want double meat experience, combined with that rye bread and the Russian dressing, one of my favorite sandwiches in all of New York City, and honestly, something that I would say New York does better than any place else in the world, the deli sandwich. You can argue pizza, you can argue bagels, you can argue hot dogs. Anthony Bourdain said it many times. This is what New York does better than anybody, and I think Sarge's does it better than the rest. My personal opinion, New Yorkers will fight you to the death on who their favorites are, but I'll tell you, I don't see a single tourist in here. I've had many of you out there call me out for not ordering Doc Brown's celery soda. I've actually never had celery soda. Oh, that's really good. I approve this pairing, but bring your appetite when you come here. Sarge's is interesting because for years and years they were open 24 hours, but after the pandemic, like many businesses, they do now close at 10 p.m. So you can't come here at 3 o'clock in the morning and try to fight a hangover with a big pastrami sandwich anymore. No shame using a fork and knife if you want to get your money's worth here. No shame. All right, that was the gut bomb of the video, but we've got more. Everyone in New York has their favorite pizza spot. Bleecker Street has always been mine. I lived in the Village for 10 years, and it is by far my viewers' favorite pick that I have ever recorded at. I'm constantly getting tagged here. So when I pick an iconic pizza spot for the video, it's Bleecker Street.
Hi, thanks for your videos.
Oh, you're welcome. You saw this in my video?
Yes, yes.
How is it? Is it good?
It's really good.
It's good?
Yeah.
You approve? Okay.
Approved,
If
yeah.
you guys approve, I'm happy. Where are you from?
London, but originally Estonia.
Ah, cool. Well, welcome to New York. They approve the pizza, I'm happy. Wow, thank you so much. Fresh Nonna Maria. Dreams are made of this. My absolute favorite pizza in all New York City. You know, first and foremost, I love the story of Bleecker Street Pizza. It was opened by a retired police captain who served at Ground Zero during 9/11. And this was his grandma's recipe. Thin crust with fresh mozzarella, homemade marinara sauce, finest Parmesan, fresh basil, and Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. I think that's like the missing ingredient in a lot of pies right now in New York City. You're seeing Parmigiano Reggiano cheese being used, which is imported from Italy and very, very expensive. Here we go. It's been too long since I've had this actually. All of those premium ingredients together just hits different, I'm telling you. I'm not trying to compare this to your everyday New York City slice. That's its own animal, but this particular slice here, it's a specialty. It lies somewhere between the Neapolitan pizza and a regular New York slice. Holds up really well. Nice undercarriage, a lot of sauce, a lot of cheese, very saucy. You're into a saucy slice, you are gonna fall in love with the Nonna Maria. Everybody behind me is ordering a Nonna Maria. This is by far what they're most known for. I've had the other slices here before, all very good, but this is what you travel to Bleecker Street Pizza for. Oh, where are you from? Croatia. Was it good? Too good? That's what I like to hear. I think of all the places I've ever filmed, this is the spot where people are most likely to say hi. And it's really cool that a long time ago they put me on the wall of fame here. So I don't know if there's a bigger honor in my life than being on the wall of my favorite pizza spot. This is like a greatest hits album. You know how musicians have their greatest hits? One CD, one album? Today's video is just like my favorites. A lot of tourists I meet are obsessed with trying New York cheesecake. They run to spots like Junior's. Well, I prefer Eileen's special cheesecake. Hi. How can I help? Two of the classic plains. We're doing a YouTube thing about the most iconic foods of New York. So.
Well, ours is the best cheesecake in the city.
That's what I tell people. It's why I'm here. They've been open almost 50 years for a reason. They were telling me in there that they actually designed these special cheesecakes to be this small for all the tour groups from around the world and tourists that come in. I mean, I'm always singing their praises as well. This is the plain, a lot of cream cheese, graham cracker crust. Makes it a little more unique. This is really the only dessert I possibly could have had after all the food we feasted on today. We will end with this cheesecake icon. So light, so creamy. I'm not the biggest cheesecake fan, but for Eileen's, I always make an exception. And I just don't think you have to make a special trip to eat cheesecake if you're eating some huge meal and then you gotta force yourself to have dessert. This is perfect because you're right on the edge of Soho here, so you're probably gonna be in the area at some point. Grab a quick dessert on the go and try New York's most famous dessert choice, cheesecake. They bake so many of these, so they're so busy, they're always getting a fresh piece. Tart-sized cheesecake, perfect for on the go, or you could eat it inside. New York has changed. In today's video, we'll update you about some new scams that both tourists and locals need to be aware of. Plus, we'll revisit some classic cons you need to watch out for. So you know about the fake merchandise handbags that you can buy all over Canal Street, but there's a new wrinkle to this that has been making headlines, and that's knockoff Apple products. I'm talking about AirPods Pro, AirPods Max. They're selling for hundreds of dollars off the retail price all over Canal Street. It sounds too good to be true. The New York Post even ran an undercover operation showing how they were fakes. The instructions were in different languages. Best case scenario, they're gonna work and be awful quality. Worst case, these AirPods won't even function. What's crazy is you won't just see this occurring on Canal Street. I've seen it all over Manhattan. I've seen sellers even in Brooklyn on Fifth Ave, near where I live, which is not a touristy area at all. And clearly, people are still falling for this, otherwise they wouldn't be out in such high numbers. Look, I'm a huge fan of cheap eats, but in New York, you definitely do not want to buy cheap electronics. Something else to keep in mind if you buy one of these Apple knockoffs, there is a no refund policy. Good luck finding the seller that you bought from. So remember that, always buy directly from the retailer or try to get a better price online with a reputable website. This next new scam is occurring in one of New York's most touristy locations, Central Park, so listen closely. Especially my women watching, as that's who the prime target of this has been, and how it works is a group of teens will approach you and ask for a donation for their sports team, but instead of cash, they'll ask for Zelle or Venmo payment, the money transferring apps on your cell phone. Then they convince you to hand your phone to them saying they'll type in their email. All seems good until you check the transaction and realize these guys just milked you for thousands of dollars. Yes, they took a combined $4,000 from 4 victims already. This happens mostly at Sheep's Meadow, which is the most popular part of Central Park. Where to begin? The most obvious thing here is never to hand your phone to a stranger for any reason whatsoever. This is even worse than giving somebody your wallet for a donation. It's like giving them the keys to your bank vault. They can go absolutely wild, and there's no guarantee that you're gonna get your money back. A former Miss New York even got taken by this. Apparently she was groggy from having her wisdom teeth removed and was targeted at Madison Square Park. I'd be on guard for anyone who approaches you asking for a donation, and we'll tell you about a classic con that uses this very same tactic later on in the video. Also, there's a variation on this where instead of a donation for a team, it's selling candy. Be aware out there. This next new scam has many variations. Pay attention even if you don't live in New York, because it could happen anywhere in the US, but it involves unpaid parking tickets. The scammers will send a text that says the recipient has an unpaid parking ticket in the city or a toll fee to pay. I was even targeted for this myself. I got a text message about an unpaid toll. I had recently rented a car, so for a second, I thought it was real, but no. It's a phishing site that once you input your credit card information, will put that into the hands of hackers. I've also myself received texts about mail that hasn't been picked up by the USPS, and they're charging you a fee to hold it. There's a lot of variations on it. Be very careful about any text message you get, period, asking about payment. These scams are getting sophisticated, and I always seem to get them right as I wake up in the morning. So one of these days, I may even fall for it. There's an interesting hustle right now being reported on Reddit that I've been curious about for a really long time, and it's about getting overcharged at bodegas or delis. What's a scam you run into often in the city? Today, a bodega owner tried to charge me $6 for a can of Diet Coke and then said, "Oh, sorry, my mistake," when I caught it. Dude tried to charge $15 for a bacon, egg, and cheese and got real flustered when I went, "Oh, no worries, I live here. I'll just go to the bodega down the block that has them for $6. Years ago, something like this actually happened to me. Granted, I had a few drinks in my system, I was out at night in the village, I ordered a bagel, and the guy at the bodega quoted me some wild price, and I said, "Wait, what was that again?" And then he gave me the real price. Look, most people that work at delis and bodegas are very honest, but every once in a while, the price listed is not the price you are actually gonna be quoted. So when in doubt at a bodega, ask them for each individual price if you're getting a bunch of items. Usually there's price tags on them anyway. It's sad that there are a few dishonest owners or staff out there who are making everybody else look bad. Now, we have talked time and time again about another variation on this, and that is getting ripped off by street food carts. Now, how it works is if the price is not listed, let's say for a hot dog vendor, and you order all the food, some dishonest vendors are gonna charge you whatever they think they can get away with. And I've heard stories of my viewers getting charged $15, $20 for a hot dog. So what you have to do is, if the prices are not listed, and they should be listed on every street food cart, ask for them in advance. Heck, the other day, I was by Prospect Park and a hot dog vendor tried charging me $4 for a water. It happens still. Battery Park is the gateway to the Statue of Liberty, and there are plenty of scams to be on the lookout for here, starting from when you walk up the subway steps. You'll get asked if you're going to the Statue of Liberty. This has gotten so out of hand that there's even signs here reminding you illegal ticket vendors are selling deceptive tickets that cannot access the Statue of Liberty or Ellis Island. Illegal ticket vendors cannot upgrade Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island tickets. Statue City Cruises is the only authorized boat to the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. To save yourself a massive headache, Pre-book your Statue of Liberty tickets on the City Cruises website. That way, when you arrive here, you don't have to worry about anything or buy tickets that may not actually get you to the Statue of Liberty or charge you too much money. And to go one step further, book access to the crown of the statue if you can, because that is an unforgettable experience. And remember to steer clear of any vendors who try to sell you better tickets to get to the statue or Ellis Island. In fact, a few years ago, actor Alec Baldwin even fell for this, buying 4 tickets that sent him to New Jersey. And he's from New York, and he still fell for this. And one more reminder, the Staten Island Ferry is free. You do not need tickets to board it and get a great view of the Statue of Liberty. There was a story a few years ago about somebody who was selling tickets to the Staten Island Ferry for $200 and tourists fell for it. Never ever buy tickets for the Staten Island Ferry. This is something I never thought I'd be discussing, but here we are. The city has been warning people about scams involving artificial intelligence. And these are typically some kind of voice cloning, pretending to be a loved one. In one instance, a mom got a call from her daughter who's 14 and said she got arrested and would have to pay cash to bail her out. It was her daughter's voice. It was accurate. Luckily, her daughter did eventually call her for real. They're not super common yet, but I think over time they could be. And these are the signs the city mentioned you need to be on the lookout for this kind of AI cloning scam. You're contacted out of the blue, you're pressured to act immediately with no time to think, the caller is urgently requesting money, usually through a wire transfer, gift card, payment app, or crypto. These methods of payment make it nearly impossible to get a refund once you've been scammed. The caller is requesting personal or private information from you. You're told to keep the caller's request a secret. Well, we talked about getting weird text messages. Now you gotta be on the lookout for weird phone calls as well. And if you're in doubt, you could always ask the AI clone a personal question that they probably won't know the answer to if you put them on the spot. We have a whole video dedicated to surviving your arrival to JFK Airport, but there's 2 airport scams you really need to be on the lookout for. The first is anyone approaching you outside the taxi line offering you a lift to the city. The problem here is even if they offer you a better rate, once your luggage is in their trunk, you are at their mercy. They're not registered by anyone or insured. Either wait in the taxi line or use a rideshare service like Uber, Lyft, or Revel, and use this code here to get 70% off your first Revel ride if you're interested, and those are all electronic cars. The other scam is even sneakier. I've seen it with my own eyes. Someone holding an Uber sign. They'll ask if you were calling an Uber and try to negotiate a high rate with you without using the app. Remember, Ubers can only be called from the app on your phone. These are not real Uber drivers. We'll call this the Times Square trifecta, although you could run into any of these in different locations around the city. The most classic scams in New York, the fake monks. They'll approach you and offer you either a bracelet or some cheap trinket, then show you a guest book and photos of the Buddhist temple they're raising money for. This temple does not exist. They are not real monks. Don't even engage. The CD guys. I really feel like the CD guys have duped so many tourists because every time I mention them, the comments are full of stories. Here's how it works. These would-be rappers usually travel in packs and try to hand you a CD. If you accept it, they'll aggressively ask you for a tip. Or if they engage you in conversation, they'll ask for your name and autograph the CD. Either way, expect to be really pressured to hand over some cash. I've heard many stories about how these CDs are blank. The costume characters. This is all over Times Square. Mickey Mouse, Spider-Man, the Hulk. Pose for a photo with them and expect each and every one of them to pester you for a big tip. Be extra careful if your kids run up to them and want a photo because after you take that picture, they will get aggressive for money. If you must take a photo with them, set a price first. The dropped food, glass, medicine scam. This is the oldest con in the book, and yes, it still occurs even in 2024. How it works is the crook will walk up to you, bump into you, and then whatever falls on the ground, accuse you of breaking it. They'll then demand payment on the spot or have you walk to an ATM with them to get cash. I know someone personally who had this happen to them with a bottle of malt liquor, and they didn't know any better and paid the guy. Heck, there was even one con artist in the village who did this so frequently, they posted his photo on the streets. It was honestly like a rite of passage living near Bleecker Street. He tried it on my wife with French fries, but she had watched my videos and knew that he was full of it. Then, months later, he even tried it on me. My wife was with me, we just laughed, and he probably scooped up those French fries and kept walking, looking for somebody else to trick. Although I do wonder how much he would have charged me for those fries. If anybody says you caused them to drop something, keep on walking, they won't follow you. The I need money hustle. I have waxed poetic about people approaching you near any of the bus or train terminals asking you for money to get to Buffalo just this once. And of course, the next day, they'll be there again asking for money to some other destination. And I've even seen a variation of this by the air train at JFK Airport on the elevator when you're stuck with them and you can't run away to say no. Of course, you can say no. A new one I've been hearing about is somebody standing outside of a bodega and they'll ask you for money for baby formula for their sick child. Now, in New York, if anyone asks you for money for any reason on the street, they are not going to be using it for said purpose. Trust me. 3-card Monte and shell games. This is the kind of thing you see in the movies, but I swear it has made a comeback in New York after COVID. I didn't even believe it until I saw a game occurring near Bryant Park last year during the Christmas season. A small crowd will form, they're all in on it, they'll lull you into thinking you can win some money, and you may win a little until you put a big bet down and lose it all. Even if you can read their slate of hand and pick the right card, one of the guys in on it will jump in, double their bet, pick the other card, giving their money right back to the house. It is literally impossible to win, so don't even try. It's rigged.
What's new in New York for 2024? In this video, we're filling you in on some exciting new attractions, food destinations, and even Broadway shows so you don't miss out this coming year. The Beam at Rockefeller Center. This is the most controversial new attraction in New York for 2024 because if you're afraid of heights, this could terrify you. The Beam opened in December and it pays tribute to the iconic 1932 photo Lunch atop a skyscraper depicting 11 iron workers lunching precariously on a steel beam. Now the good news is you'll at least be wearing a harness for this. It's a 90-second experience as the beam lifts you into the air and spins you around for what is likely to be a view you won't soon forget. I'm not the biggest fan of heights, and I'm even interested in trying this. Tickets start at $40 to get access to Top of the Rock, and this is an add-on for $25 extra dollars. Would you try this? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious. Field of Light. I predict this will be the most popular new attraction of 2024 because it's free, spanning more than 6 acres on Manhattan's east side from 38th to 41st Street, east of First Ave at Freedom Plaza. British artist Bruce Monroe has displayed this all over the UK and US. New York got its version on December 15th, 2023, and it will run for 12 months. It's pretty self-explanatory. You'll walk winding paths around 19,000 low-light fiber optic STEM spheres that will illuminate with a slow, subtle change of hue. Of course, this starts after dusk every night as you'll be surrounded by the UN, the Manhattan skyline, and even the East River. I think it's really open to interpretation, but Monroe is trying to create an emotional response to anyone who walks through it. Now the bad news is tickets are sold out through February, but on February 1st, they will release tickets for March, and that could be the play the first of the month to get tickets for the next month. The good news is if it's sold out when you come, you can still see it from above. The best views are near 38th Street and First Ave through the fence. The installation will be lit for the winter season, Thursday through Saturday evenings 5 to 9 p.m. This may be the most exciting update for the video. Some of my all-time favorite cheap eat spots from the outer boroughs are expanding into Manhattan. So if location was holding you back, you've got no excuses now. Utopia Bagels opening a Manhattan location this summer, and I am so picky about bagels growing up in North Jersey, and Utopia Bagels in Whitestone, Queens absolutely blew my mind when we filmed there. It's as good as it gets in the city, not to mention their amazing sandwiches if you want to get fancy. And now you can walk from Midtown Manhattan because they're opening a new outpost on 34th and Lex at some point in the summer of 2024. Manhattan just got really lucky. Dad's Deli in Hollis, Queens was my favorite sandwich of 2023. Their oxtail mac patty went viral internationally because is absolutely mouth-watering. And now they have a location in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. So you've got Dad's Deli, not too far from Cass's Deli, two sandwich icons back to back. Lucia's of Avenue X now has a Lucia's of Soho on Canal Street, and this is seriously one of the most underrated pizza spots in Brooklyn, with a spot on Canal in Lower Manhattan. Now everybody is gonna find out how good that vodka slice is. They've even got a perfect 5.0 on Google so far after being open only a month in Manhattan, and New Yorkers are picky reviewers. Speaking of eating, New York is looking to make outdoor dining permanent, which was one of the few bright spots during the pandemic. But there are some restrictions here, the biggest being they can't be set up from November 30th to March 31st to allow for snow plowing. The rules aren't officially set, but according to the New York Times, restaurants can offer outdoor dining from 10 a.m. until midnight and will for the first time be required to pay fees based on their location and square footage, with higher fees in Manhattan south of 125th. Restaurant owners will have a phased-in period stretching to as late as November 2024 to comply. Where are my Broadway fans at? There are about 16 shows that are slated to open in 2024, and the theme this year seems to be revivals. Here are some of the ones I find most interesting. Prayer for the French Republic. This won multiple off-Broadway awards following its 2021 world premiere, and it opens on Broadway January 9th. 5 generations apart, members of one French-Jewish family face down the same fears of anti-Semitism and hopes for their safety in their longtime home. The Notebook, beginning February 10th, the new musical adaptation of Nicholas Sparks' novel, and no, ladies, Ryan Gosling will not be reprising his movie role. The Who's Tommy, beginning March 8th, the Pinball Wizards making a return. This one is on my personal list because I want to experience The Who's 1969 album, Tommy, in a theater. And a cool bonus, this is staged by the original Broadway productions director, Des McAnuff. The Outsiders, opening March 16th. Much like The Notebook, this coming-of-age high school story has moved from book to cinema and now on to Broadway. I'm a big fan of the movie, and The Outsiders focuses on a band of Tulsa greasers whose brotherhood may be rocky, but it's their only source of support as they come of age. Stay gold, Pony Boy. Hell's Kitchen. Alicia Keys fans, where you at? You're gonna love this. Hell's Kitchen, a love letter to her home city and the title neighborhood where she grew up. It sets the story of a teenage girl's coming of age to all of Keys' biggest songs. This opens April 1st. Cabaret. This is going to be the third revival of Cabaret on Broadway this spring at the August Wilson Theater, which will be fully transformed into the Kit Kat Club. This production won 7 Olivier Awards in London and should be a hit in New York. Uncle Vanya, the Chekhov classic, back on Broadway in April for the first time in 24 years, and who loved The Office, a 40-year-old virgin? Steve Carell stars as Uncle Vanya. It's about a family turned upside down as more relatives move in by Pulitzer and Tony-nominated writer Heidi Schreck. The Wiz, the first Broadway revival of this musical, is planned for March 2024, which will star Wayne Brady in the title role. The Wiz was groundbreaking in its 1975 premiere for putting a vibrant black cultural spin on the Wizard of Oz tale. Our Town. There's no exact date set yet, but Our Town is coming back to Broadway for fall 2024. Tony Award winner Kenny Leone will direct this play about neighbors George Gibbs and Emily Webb. It's arguably one of the best American plays ever written and a no-brainer to see once it comes out. From Broadway to museums, there's some cool ones coming to the city in 2024. The Universal Hip Hop Museum will open at hip hop's birthplace in the Bronx. The $80 million exhibit space will feature items such as a giant oil painting of Kanye West and Snoop Dogg's bicycle from the short-lived MTV sketch show Doggy Fizzle Televizzle. It will also beam out live musical performances, breakdancing sessions, and fashion shows that can be viewed online. Mercer Labs at the Museum of Art and Technology redefines the museum experience. Many of you may have already been here, as it's in the old building that housed Century 21. Through 15 experimental exhibition spaces, interactive experiences, unique listening encounters, and immersive installations, the relationship between art and technology is redefined. I'm really curious how this will play out. It's opening this month. Tickets start at $52. The Stonewall National Monument
Monument Visitor Center opening June 2024, commemorating the spot that served as a turning point for the LGBTQ+ civil rights movement. The mission is to preserve, advance, and celebrate the legacy of the Stonewall Rebellion. You'll meet the advocates and pioneers who came before and learn about the events that shaped the LGBTQ civil rights movement. This will be at 51 Christopher Street in the Village and will be part of the National Park System. Undergoing a comprehensive renovation, the Frick Collection is set to reopen in late 2024 in its original location on 5th Ave, facing Central Park. The Historic Museum is known for its exceptional collection of fine and decorative arts. You'll have until March 3rd to see it at its temporary location on Madison Ave. It seems like every year we get a new pier opening on Hudson River Park, and Pier 97 is set to go in the spring of 2024. Pier 97 will include a playground with water spray features, an activity field, and a gently sloping lawn, as well as an all-ages slide. The New York Botanical Garden is bringing back their orchard show from February 17th to April 21st, called Florals in Fashion. This was inspired by the connection between fashion and the botanical world. Each designer will put their personal perspective on that connection using colorful florals and specimen from the garden's collections and beyond. The Botanical Garden will invite visitors to walk the orchard runway as they're surrounded by thousands of beautiful orchids and immersive installations. Let's take a look at a few things in development beyond 2024. Plus Pool has been in the works for years, and while it won't open in 2024, it's moving forward. The 9,300 square foot pool would be filled with water filtered from, get this, the East River. They've been given a notice to proceed with due diligence on the project in the waters north of the Manhattan Bridge. So someday soon, you'll be able to swim in the East River and not potentially grow another toe. I've hinted at the transformation of One Times Square in previous updates on what's new in NYC. Now it seems 2025 is set as the grand unveiling year. This ambitious $500 million makeover will, for the first time in many years, allow public access to much of the building's interior where the Times Square ball drops. It's not just a simple renovation, it's a complete reimagining. The plan includes a state-of-the-art visitor center, an awe-inspiring viewing deck, an immersive museum experience, and 12 floors dedicated to interactive brand experiences that promise to engage and fascinate visitors. I'm hoping there's some kind of an exhibit where you can lower the Times Square ball every 10 seconds. If the museum folks are watching, please add that.
The first impression many tourists get of New York is right here at the airport, and unfortunately, it's not always a pleasant one. Today, I'll share how to avoid getting ripped off and scammed minutes after you arrive, and then the best and cheapest ways to get from JFK to Midtown Manhattan, and a few other common airport mistakes you want to avoid that'll have you feeling like a local. Here we go. We're gonna start with two potential scams that tourists need to be aware of the second they get out of arrivals, and one of these is so sneaky that even some of my more experienced travelers could fall for it. You've seen it in the movies, hailing a taxi from the airport and riding into the city in style, but that's where you have to be careful. Here's how it works. You'll walk out here and somebody will approach you offering you a taxi ride. They might say taxi or Midtown. And they may even tell you you'll get a better price than anywhere else, but never accept these rides. Or this could happen. This British couple was scammed $470. A man stood in the airport entrance, offered them a cab to their hotel, and Craig assumed it would go to the meter and cost 50 bucks. The pair later realized they should have been suspicious when he led them away to a private car park, away from the taxi rank and into a minibus driven by a second man. He asked them for the $20 for the parking fee, which they presumed would be taken off the bill, and told them they'd sort the fare when we get there. He started explaining to us that there were new toll fees for going between boroughs and over bridges. He then told me to take me to Manhattan. It was going to be $900. Now, I know what you're all thinking. If this happened to me, I would just get out of the car as soon as he told me that bad price. But keep this in mind, if your luggage is in the back, you're practically a hostage. This guy had an expensive engagement ring in his suitcase, and he really had no choice but to negotiate with the rogue driver. Now, if you do end up taking one of these unmarked taxis, best case scenario, you'll probably get a little bit ripped off. Worst case scenario, you'll pay a fortune or worse. And keep this in mind, even if you think you're getting a better deal, these cars are not insured. If anything goes wrong, you have nobody that you can complain to.
Oh, welcome.
We're here for 5 days. I've watched everything.
We're actually making a video right now about arriving to the airport. If you don't mind, you feel free to be in the video.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. Imagine that you arrive in New York and the first person you see is me. An even sneakier scam is somebody will be holding up an iPad or a sign that says Uber. Now maybe you're coming from overseas and you think in the US that Ubers are just waiting for you without calling them. These are not Ubers. They're also unlicensed cars. It's the same situation. You're gonna be going into a livery cab. They're gonna charge you whatever they want and you have no insurance, no way to fight anything. So also avoid those. I have seen those fake Ubers as recently as this year at LaGuardia. What are the legitimate ways to get a car into Manhattan? And the first and the most obvious is taking a yellow taxi. Now, if you're like my parents, you don't like messing with a smartphone, this is by far the easiest and simplest way to get into Midtown or anywhere else in New York. You just find the taxi sign right there. They will assign you a number and you just find the lane. There was like 10 people waiting. Actually, I don't think you would have waited very long at all for a taxi had you have taken this lane. The guy's really asking for a taxi right there. You see that? The guy behind me is literally trying to get people to not take the taxi line and just go. It still happens. As of late 2023, the flat fare is $70 or $75 if it's between 4 to 8 p.m. during weekdays and excluding holidays. Then we have tolls up to $6.94, a $2.50 congestion surcharge for trips that end in Manhattan south of 96th Street, which is likely where you'll be staying. So you're looking at about $95 to $100, including a $12 to $15 tip. This is not an inexpensive method to get into the city, but I do recommend it highly for groups or for people that are just not comfortable navigating public transit. By the way, if you have an issue with your driver, the good news is that you can contact something called 311. You can report unsafe driving or any other issue you run into. Just make sure you have your driver's name or identifying number from the taxi if you do run into any problems. And one more thing, all New York City taxis must have a working credit card reader. Ride shares. Now this is my personal preferred method. When I'm at JFK Airport, normally I'm traveling with my wife and my son. I don't want to deal with public transit. And why I love ride shares at this airport is you have 3 different options that you can shop with and see what the best deal is. Important note, any terminal at JFK or any area airport is gonna have signs for either rideshare pickup, Uber, Lyft pickup, whatever it may be. Just follow the signs outside. I'm gonna use all 3 rideshare apps and I'm gonna check which one has the best price, the Marriott Marquis in Midtown. JFK Terminal 4. All right, we're gonna start with Uber. We have got a price of $89.93, which a little bit more than a taxi would be, and you would wait 1 minute, so you wouldn't have to deal with a taxi line. Next up, Lyft. Price would be, cheapest would be $91.95, so $2 more. And my personal favorite is Revel, where you ride completely electric cars. Use this code for 40% off your first 2 rides. $88.47. Although I will admit Revel does have the longest wait of 17 minutes. That's the issue with Revels, is they do tend to take a little bit longer than a Lyft or an Uber. Something else to keep in mind about ride shares is you are expected to tip 15 to 20%, depending on the experience that you had. So factor that in. Those costs though do include tolls. In this scenario, at this time of day, I believe a taxi would have saved you maybe $2 or $3. So they were all almost the same. Now, when you call your ride share, you just have to cross the street, at least at Terminal 4, they're pretty similar, and find on your phone what letter and number corresponds to your driver. So if you got an Uber, it might say B1 or B2, and that's where your driver's gonna meet you. Just follow the signs. They make it really easy here. When you're arriving to New York City, make sure you have the exact address, east side or west side if you're in Manhattan. I'm gonna show you why. If you just put 109 42nd Street onto Uber, you would get the following choices. The first option is in Union City, New Jersey. So if you just tap that, you're heading to Jersey and you're probably spending $150. 109 East 42nd Street's by Bryant Park, and 109 West 42nd is a completely different address. So look very carefully at your address, and if it says New York, New York, that's Manhattan. If it says Brooklyn, New York, that is not Manhattan. Look how much that would cost you from here. $140. One other trick to keep in mind if you have some patience and the prices are surging on all the apps, if you wait 10 or 15 minutes, it could change. Of course, in that case, you might just be better off waiting in the taxi line so you can see how long the taxi line is. If it's not long, a lot of times that is a better play. Before we get to the lower cost options to get to Manhattan, I want to throw one more out there that I think is just not worth it, and that is the shared shuttle service. It's about $50, and how it works is they pack as many passengers as possible into a van and they just drive you all over Manhattan, dropping people off. Now, depending how lucky you are, it might be the same speed as a taxi or an Uber. If you're unlucky, you might be sitting in gridlock traffic as the shuttle goes from hotel to hotel, and if your hotel's last, it could take you 2 hours with traffic to get there. So I think in this case, the middle ground is not worth it. I'd either go expensive or cheap. By the way, for those who haven't been here since 2020, the New York City Airporter bus no longer operates. It was $19 into the city, not a thing anymore. If you are on an absolute budget, I'm gonna show you how to get to Midtown Manhattan using public transit. Now, something to keep in mind about both of these options is it's extra work. If you're flying in overnight, if it's your first time in the city, if you have a big group, I recommend a taxi or a ride share. But if you really want to save money, these two options are interesting. So the first step is to find signs for the air train in any terminal. And something to keep in mind here is that for the air train, you pay at the end. You do not pay for your ticket before boarding. It's free to ride around the terminals. That's how people transfer. All right, so a lot of flights have just arrived. We're following the signs here. Transit to the city. It's going to arrive on both sides. We're going to Jamaica Station. Next one's in 5 minutes. Hear what she said? Let the other passengers off first before you get on. That's subway courtesy as well. Remember what I said, if you have an overnight flight, you just don't want to deal with stressful situations? This can be a little stressful. The first thing to keep in mind when you get off the air train is you cannot use contactless payment. You have to have a Metro card or a special AirTrain card, which you normally get from the machine the second you get out.
Because the fee has been waived.
So this is interesting. I've heard stories about this. They waived the AirTrain fee. It's free today. Maybe because there's too many people.
Please proceed down to level 1. You can walk.
Well, they must have known I was coming. What's this? Guys, I'm sorry. The air train just went from free to back to $8.25 5 minutes later. I have no idea why. I learn something new every day. You could just get lucky and not pay. Unless it's your lucky day, like it just was for us, and they suddenly waive AirTrain fees, you need to go to one of the machines and pay $8.25 to purchase an AirTrain pass, plus an extra $1 for the new card. Now, I would just buy a Metro card with it, which would be $9.25. Then you have two choices, one of which is the cheaper one to take the New York City Subway for $2.75. Now, you could add $2.75 to your card there, pay $12 and be ready with one swipe, or watch my New York City Subway Survival Guide video so you know how to use Omni contactless payment on your phone. I recommend that so much more than having to spend extra money to put more on the Metro card. Just tap and go for the Subway. I'm gonna show you how to take the Subway and why I honestly don't like it very much. Let's go. All right, so we are following the crowd, following signs for the Subway. We're looking for the E-Train. So while you are getting the best price, you are also walking a lot more. Now, because the AirTrain fee was waived, this would be the only option to buy a Metro card. And look at this line here. So hopefully you have contactless payment enabled on your phone. You can skip this line. All right, let's find the E-Train heading for Manhattan. I'm gonna recommend if you take the Subway, go as far down as you can away from the crowds. You'll get a better chance at a seat. The only advantage I see to the E-Train is if your hotel is located close to one of the stops, it actually could be kind of useful. But if you're staying anywhere in Midtown, I just don't think this is the best option. Let me show you what to do when the train comes. It takes about 50 minutes to get to Midtown. As I said, go towards the end and you'll probably get a seat if you're fast. Instead of taking the subway, I prefer taking the Long Island Railroad, also known as the LIRR. So either if the air train happens to be free, you leave, or you pay $8.25 plus the extra $9.25 to exit off the machine. Now you can either buy a Long Island Railroad ticket from another machine, just a little bit down the corridor, or my pick, go to the MTA Train Time app and you would select Jamaica as the origin, and then either Grand Central or Penn Station as the destination. And there's one right now, there's one in 8 minutes. These are running constantly to 34th Street Penn Station. And you could buy a city ticket off peak for $5. That's it, $5 is what you would have to spend. So that's $2.25 more to get to Manhattan in double the speed and to be in more comfort, as I'm about to show you. If your train is between 6 and 8 in the morning on the LIRR heading to Manhattan, or 4 to 8 p.m. on the way back to JFK, you can buy what's called a peak city ticket, which is only $2 more at $7. So again, the total cost would be $14.25 in most situations to get to 34th Street, Penn Station, or 42nd Street, Grand Central. You've got two choices. We're doing a video about how to get from the airport to the city.
Okay, so we're gonna go under all other tickets, city tickets, off peak, and you're going to make it a pen.
Want to go? $5. Thank you. So the trick is, if you want to get, thank you for helping us, if you want to get a city ticket, you have to go all other tickets to get the discounted price. Friendly staff here too. Got on our phone that it's track 2, easy to find. No escalator, unfortunately. That kind of sucks. If you have a ton of luggage, I don't recommend the subway or the LIRR. If you have a reasonable amount of luggage, LIRR is fine. But you may find yourself taking some steps like this. And if you're unsure, you just look up. It says Penn Station, 3 minutes. It is so clear. I'm telling you, for $2.25, you're getting like $10 of a better experience. Very important, before boarding, make sure to activate your ticket, okay? I have to show you all a common mistake I see with the LIRR. I've had viewers, I believe, they get on this and they just go right to the ends. And look, this barely could even fit my small suitcase. In order to find the biggest luggage rack, you have to go to the middle areas of the train. This would fit a suitcase, I think almost double this size. Also, for that extra $2.25, look how much more space you get here. Oh, just cleaner, nicer. And this goes directly to Penn Station. Now, you're still gonna have to walk or possibly take another subway depending where your destination is in the city, so factor that in. A topic that I have been asked so many times that I've never actually addressed in a video is about SIM cards when you arrive to New York. Now, you do have the option to buy it at JFK, but I'm gonna tell you why I don't recommend that. Now, in the past, they did have SIM card machines. There's one here at Terminal 4, but it's not even operating. So your only option is to go to a kiosk, and I checked myself. I was just curious, what's the cheapest 7-day pass you have?
The cheapest is $45. You get 4 GB internet, unlimited phone, unlimited.
Okay, thank you. The cheapest 7-day SIM card was $45, which I think is too expensive. So your best bet is, one, check with your local carrier to see if they offer some kind of an international package. That might just be the easiest for you. You don't have to deal with SIM cards, going to a store. The other would be going on Amazon or any other retailer online before you leave. You can order US SIM cards in advance off of Amazon. And if you can't do any of those, I recommend going to the T-Mobile store, which is right across the street from Macy's by Herald Square in Midtown Manhattan. $15 to $30 is the range that I've been told. Do some research on that, but I definitely don't recommend buying it right away at JFK Airport because they do have pretty good Wi-Fi available. In fact, let me check if it works for me. Free JFK Wi-Fi, free unlimited Wi-Fi. You're now online. The free Wi-Fi, it's working. So if you're concerned about calling an Uber, I think you should be able to get service across this. Should we check? Let's check. If you do call an Uber and you're using the JFK Wi-Fi, I tested it. I lost it like right across the street. So I think you could hang out by the terminal and you could probably see your car more or less when it's about to pull up and then go. I think you could survive just on the terminal Wi-Fi. These smart carts are $6 to rent and you purchase them inside. Now, sometimes if you get lucky, somebody might just leave one out here and you might be able to use it for free. Not guaranteed to happen, so if you have a lot of luggage, this can actually be quite useful. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to Union City, New Jersey.
Today, we're gonna become the first YouTubers ever to visit every single New York City observation deck in one day and answer the question, which one is best for you?
We've got One World Observatory, opened in 2015. Tickets start $43, and its claim to fame is it's in the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, 1,776 feet high at the top. You can get to floor 102, 1,268 feet above the city. Got our tickets on our phones, we're ready to rock. It's the best advice I can give you about any observation deck in New York City. Pre-buy your tickets. You're gonna be spending enough time in lines. This is, in my opinion, the coolest part about One World.
Welcome to One World Observatory.
We just saw the history of New York City in about 60 seconds as we went up. So what really makes One World unique is it is the only observatory that is completely indoors. So on a freezing cold day, this is probably where I would tell you to go. And you see the Statue of Liberty right there. You have an unobstructed view of the entire region from up here, 360 degrees. You also have the bragging rights of saying you are in the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere. I'm so used to seeing the Brooklyn and the Manhattan bridges from street level that seeing it from up here actually is really, really cool. New York City, it looks like a Lego set from this vantage point. This is where everybody is grouped together, that straight line shot of Midtown Manhattan. And I can even see our next stop, the Edge, straight that way. You could plot out the entire video from up here. It's basically boom, 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 boom. Great view of New Jersey this way. And as someone who's from New Jersey, I understand most people are not looking here. For somebody that wants an entire lay of the land of New York City, there is no observation deck that's gonna be better than One World. On a personal note, it is not one of my favorites because I like to be outdoors for this sort of experience. But for people who are big into architecture and wanting to see everything, this is tough to beat. I'm pretty sure out in the distance there, we can even see Pennsylvania. Whoa.
Thank you for visiting One World Observatory.
We've got to hustle. We've got an 11 a.m. entry to the Edge. This is the only observation deck located inside of a mall. We're going to the most unaffordable neighborhood in the city, Hudson Yards. All right, take two. We walked into an office building next door. Even I make mistakes. We're in a rush. So apparently we weren't the only people with the smart idea of coming to the Edge on a beautiful December day. The Edge opened 2020, $38 for admission. You go to the 100th floor, you are 1,131 feet high, tallest outdoor observation deck in the Western Hemisphere. This whole line is like one big advertisement for Hudson Yards. We are outdoors for the first time in this observation deck challenge. You know, something that makes the Edge very unique is the angled glass, which I recall when I made my first video about this place, people said they were getting nervous looking at me even leaning on this. If you are afraid of heights, this is not the observation deck for you. You know, if you're afraid of heights, what are you doing on an observation deck anyway? I feel like there's an observation deck arms race right now, and last year Edge opened up something called City Climb, which we decided not to do because Ben is afraid of heights and I just didn't want to do it. $185, and you go
1,271 feet above the city. Actually, that is the highest outdoor perspective you can get in New York unless you're in a helicopter. So if you're someone that wants that photo and you want to spend about 200 bucks, go for it. I don't want to wait in an extra line, but there is a line to take a picture at the edge of the edge. And we did it when this place first opened if you want to see that perspective. But this is a very popular attraction, super popular. Expect long lines everywhere. All right, if any more people go on the glass floor here, I'm afraid it's gonna break. This is actually my favorite spot of all of the edge. A little elevated to see Lower Manhattan. Now, just a note, Edge actually can close their outdoor sky deck due to adverse weather conditions or if it's super windy. So worst case, you might just get this view, which isn't so bad, but just be warned about that. Maybe New York's most expensive glass of wine, $25 here. Little insider tip, 101st floor has an elevator with a much shorter line. 2 down, 3 more to go. Personal opinion, I think the Edge is great, but it is not one of my favorites, mostly because it's just so far away from the other buildings, and it's also a little bit on the smaller side, so you do feel kind of packed in, but it is peak tourist season, so some people love that outdoor observation deck with the angled glass. For me, not one of my favorites. Summit One Vanderbilt. This is the newest observation deck in New York City, opened last year. You get to the 92nd floor, 1,063 feet above the city. If you want to add the ascent elevator, you get 1,210 feet above the city, or the 101st floor. This is by far the most popular observation deck in New York City right now. This is the one you need to book at least a day or two in advance. We're officially starting something called the Observation Deck Challenge, 5 in 1 day. No, actually, I don't recommend you do this because we are spending probably as much time in line today as we are the observation decks. So this is just a little challenge to show you all the pros and cons of each observation deck. I do not recommend you do this. All right, we're starting our immersive experience at Summit. You'll see why you need these in a minute. Is it me or all of the observation decks have this dark tunnel thing going on?
This is a one-way experience. That means take your time on each level because you cannot go back down to previous levels.
I love this elevator. It's a little packed, but I like it.
Okay, everyone, right this way. Your journey starts here. We hope you enjoy.
After One World Observatory, that's my next favorite elevator ride with the mirrors everywhere, and you are just thrust into this experience. Putting on the shades. All right. Whew. It still trips me out to this day, this place. I love it though. We were here before it opened to the public, and I got a chance to talk with Kenzo Digital, who designed this, and he explained to me how the mirrors were supposed to be an experience where you transcend, and depending on what time of day you come and the weather conditions, it's always different. So if it's sunny, you're gonna get different reflections. If it's cloudy, if it's raining, if it's night, that was what he went for, and I think he hit an absolute home run here. It still trips me out to look down, and you see people down there, and then there's a second floor, they're up there, and there are reflections on the ceiling. While the majority of Summits indoors, they have by far the best view of the Empire State Building and of Midtown Manhattan. I don't know if you get better views at any other observation deck than here, if that's what your goal is for photography, but it is gonna be against glass, keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Time to be an influencer. Is this how influencers pose? I don't know. I'm influencing you guys. Influencing you on not to do this in 1 day. So this room's called Reflect, and they changed the vibe. It's a lot cooler in here, temperature-wise. And this is an art piece by Kusama of cloud-like objects reflecting. A little breather till we go to what might be the coolest room in New York City. I don't know if this is being followed, but you know, a lot of people don't realize that if you go past the balloons, the view outside is not bad at all. I didn't do it. It wasn't me. It was not me. This may be New York City's best bathroom view. Can you imagine how much this bathroom would rent for if it was on the open market with wraparound views like this?
All right, so this is levitation. We did this when it first opened, and I think it's absolutely fantastic to have the option, you don't have to do it, of standing out over a ledge looking at the city. Now there is a bit of a line for it, but because we're on a tight timeline today, we can't wait in line for this.
Your face in the clouds in there.
Cool.
That one?
That's me? Yep, that's me. That's a good looking cloud right there. That's a very good looking cloud. So crazy as it sounds, I actually think the outside is the least interesting thing of Summit, and it's still an amazing view.
For an extra $20, you can do the ascent elevator to get to the 101st floor. Now, after making my Summit video, I did get some of my viewers who didn't think it was worth the extra money. The reason we're not doing it today is because there is a wait time to board, and again, we are on a tight schedule to get in all 5 observation decks, but if it's something you want to do, we have footage of it. It's interesting. If you have a lot of time, you should consider adding it. Every single observation deck has its pros and cons. My personal favorite is Summit 1 Vanderbilt because it's completely immersive, and I don't think any other observation deck in the world could give you this experience. So if you're into immersive exhibits like this with amazing views, Summit will be my #1 choice. We've got 20 minutes till we have to be at Top of the Rock, and I thought of the perfect spot for a quick meal on the go. Royal Grill Halal. Some of my favorite street food in all of New York City. You can't go wrong here. Thank you, man. Much appreciated. True New York lunch right here. You can find a better value in New York for this much food for $9. Tough to top. Well, Top of the Rock just happens to be in the epicenter for tourism in New York during the holidays, right across the street from Radio City Music Hall. So this building opened in 1933. It was then called the RCA building, and Top of the Rock didn't open until 2005. $40 for admission, and it's actually the lowest observation deck in New York City, floors 67, 69, and 70, getting you only 850 feet above the city. But don't let that fool you. They got a lot going on.
Welcome to Top of the Rock.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One thing Top of the Rock wins on, it has by far the best view of Central Park, any observation deck. Now, before Summit opened, Top of the Rock had the best view of the Empire State Building because you can't see the Empire State Building from the Empire State Building. Now Summit is nicer, but this is still really good. I feel like with the opening of Summit 1 Vanderbilt and the Edge, that Top of the Rock probably suffered the most because a lot of people know the Empire State Building, and then you have the newer ones that are maybe, I don't know, sexier, but this classic Art Deco building, I think this is probably the most underrated observation deck in New York City. We know Santa's favorite observation deck's Top of the Rock. This is a cool view. I can actually see the Times Square Ball from here. And we've got the Empire State Building. We've got 1 Vanderbilt, Chrysler Building. I can even see the Edge. This is a bird's eye view. This is nice. So the GE building here at 30 Rockefeller Plaza was designed to look like a 1930s ocean liner. And when you think about it, you really look up, like this is the mast of the ship and this is the top deck. Perfectly makes sense. Something unique about Top of the Rock is that because you're only on the 70th floor, you're not above all the other buildings, so the perspective's a little bit different. You know, you don't feel like you're looking down on people. You feel like you're with the buildings, you're part of it. I have to give the tourists visiting New York a lot of credit for their patience because we've seen nothing but lines today, and I know how stressful it is to travel, but everyone has been polite. I am very impressed. I think for my observation deck purists who want a nice building with a nice view, Top of the Rock checks a lot of boxes. So if you just want that outdoor view, you need to consider Top of the Rock highly.
All right, we got one more to go, and it's a classic. I feel like when I wake up tomorrow for breakfast, I'm gonna expect there to be a line. So this is the Empire State Building, most famous building in New York City, probably the most famous building in the entire world. Admission, $47, although we got the $83 combo ticket to get to the 102nd and 86th floors. The 102nd floor is 1,250 feet above the city. This building's a classic. Just from the moment you step in, you feel it. If you are a fan of buildings, the Empire State Building, probably gonna be your favorite. So I wonder how many people in the line today are here for their 5th observation deck. Just two? Just two? While waiting in line, I've learned there's 6,514 windows at the Empire State Building. Learn something new every day. Most famous building in the world, anybody? After you wait in all the lines here, there's a nice museum to stroll around. This is cool, this is a nice touch. There's a certain nostalgia that comes with visiting the Empire State Building, which you just can't get at any other building. The 80th floor is a sneak peek of what's to come. It has those big binoculars and then beautiful indoor view of Lower Manhattan. So I've never heard this offer before. They said 30-minute wait for the elevators or walk 6 floors up. Now, I lived on the 4th floor of an apartment in Greenwich Village for 10 years. This is not a problem. I think this walk cancels out all the cheap eats and fast food that we've eaten on this channel in the last couple of years. Whew. I see it. Wow. It's taken over 8 hours, but I see the finish line more or less.
She's your biggest fan.
You enjoying New York?
Yeah. We've watched all your stuff before we came here.
Which was your favorite?
The food places one.
Ah, what a perfect way to cap off reaching the destination, meeting a nice young viewer from the UK. And I feel like we walked miles and miles and through rain, snow, ice, desert, staircases to reach this. So this was the tallest building in the world for 40 years until the World Trade Center was built in 1970. This building's got history. The issue with the Empire State Building is because it's so iconic, it's so popular, and most people only get tickets for the 86th floor. So we're trying to jockey for positioning here at night, and it's tricky. I think this is the only observation deck that has outdoor heating. I have a lot of nostalgia for this building. I came here when I was in elementary school in New Jersey, so this is the first observation deck I ever went to. I will say though, I'm not such a big fan of the metal bars here. I prefer the plexiglass or just having like the straight on view, but it's a classic. There's something really peaceful about being at any of these observation decks. You're above the chaos of the city and you can see it a little bit, but you can't hear it. On the clearest of days, you have visibility of 5 US states, 80 miles, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, even Massachusetts. If you listen to a lot of area radio and TV stations, they always say broadcasting from atop the Empire State Building. This is one of the most powerful antennas in the United States. And the top of the Empire State Building changes colors depending on the holidays, depending on world events, USA, or if a sports team wins a championship, all sorts of different reasons. You can see it all through the tri-state region. We got one more surprise left. Thank you. After 8+ hours, we have reached the top. We have finished the challenge on the 102nd floor of the Empire State Building. It's an extra $36 to get up here, and this matches the highest we were with One World's 102nd floor view. So today in total, we have gone up 466 stories. I would say this is a smaller scale version of
one world observation deck. It's narrower, but it's like the same circular view that you get, except you're in Midtown. I don't know if I would necessarily pay the extra $36 or so for this. Debatable. If it's the only observation deck you're visiting, maybe. But otherwise, I probably wouldn't. I like it. I just don't know if it's worth the extra money. Five observation decks in one day. Glad we did it. Never do it again.
Going to Broadway is an iconic New York experience, but there's so much that can go wrong. Today we'll be sharing the biggest Broadway mistakes to avoid, from getting frustrated overpaying for tickets, the agony of choosing the wrong show, and a sneaky scam that even experienced theater goers regret falling for. You don't want to miss this, trust me. And joining me for this special video, Billy Hipkins, a Broadway lifer.
I'm a lifer. I was in a Broadway show a long time ago. I've been working in wardrobe on Broadway for 25 years. I've worked on 32 different productions in the wardrobe department. Currently right here at the Winter Garden Theater doing Back to the Future, where I'm dressing the stars, Doc and Marty.
Billy, we are standing right in front of the doors to the theater, and I think a big fear of first-timers especially is choosing the wrong seats for a show.
Well, I would say there's a difference between seats for a musical and seats for a straight play. Now say if you're coming to Broadway to see Sandra Bullock in a play, sit down front. You want to get a good look at a celebrity, sit close. The thing is though, most stages are a little higher than your eye level, so you're going to be sitting looking up. If you're very close, you're going to see a lot of shoes. For musicals, I always like to say sit in the front of the mezzanine. Because we dance, we have patterns on the floor, so you get a better overview, and the lighting, the way it plays off the set and the floor and stuff, you're better off upstairs. The other thing I'd say is, the further to the side you are, and every theater has a seating chart. If you're on this side, you might miss what's happening up in the corner over there. You might be looking into the wings a little bit on that side. So center is always better. Further back can be a good thing on a lot of shows. Here's the other thing I'll tell you in front rows. If you can see the cast can see you. They see everything everybody does in that auditorium. So if you're gonna sit up front, you better be wide awake and attentive, because trust me, they're gonna talk about you when they walk off stage.
Now, Billy, one thing a lot of people are afraid of, prices. Broadway can be expensive, but we've got some methods for you to save money, and the first one are rush tickets, which in the past involved going to the theater the day of the show in the morning, getting in line for unsold seats. Now, some select theaters still do this, but many now have digital lotteries. And the day before the show, you enter your name on an app. In this link right here, every single show on Broadway and their rush policies are listed. So for example, Back to the Future, where Billy works, you can get $40 rush tickets at the box office day of the show, or $45 if you're lazy and want to do a digital rush.
I will tell you, most of the rush tickets are the first couple rows, so again, you're going to be looking up.
Another thing to look out for with rush tickets is typically the limit is only 2, and sometimes they even separate you from the other person.
There's also cancellation. I mean, every day there will be a line forming as soon as the box office opens, and as tickets are canceled by people rescheduled, they'll resell at full price, but they will sell some of our better seats day of. There are ways to do that if you feel like standing at the box office at any given show. On a big hit show with hot tickets, if the box office is going to open at 10, by 9, stand outside.
Something else to look out for with rush tickets is they also could be obstructed or limited view. You're basically at the mercy of the house. You could get lucky, you might not get the best seats, but you're going to get a good price. That's the important thing.
Now, they will tell you if they're obstructed view, they'll let you know that. Now, here's the thing. Obstructed usually means there's a column that's going to be in your view. They'll tell you that. But in a lot of the theaters, where if you're toward the back of the orchestra, the mezzanine is over your head. You have a view of the stage, but you might miss the top of the set. So on shows where action happens way up there, further back you are, you may be obstructed in that way, that you're under the overhang of the mezzanine. That is something to ask the box office. Is any of this blocking the top of the proscenium?
The other way to get cheap tickets, and you'll see this walking through Times Square, is the TKTS booth. Going there in the morning, day of a show. They will tell you what shows they have available on their website, but you do have to line up. Could take an hour, but there are deals to be had there.
My other favorite for cheapy seats, Today Tix. Get the app, Today Tix, T-I-X, run by the Theater Development Fund. You can kind of look in advance. Now on that also, you won't be able to pick where you're sitting, but you can definitely get some decent seats at a decent price.
Now, unfortunately, something that is all too common, rip-off tickets on Broadway. Many people just don't know better. And the first thing I will say is I'd be careful about buying tickets from scalpers right outside the venue. You don't know if those seats are counterfeit or not. You don't know if that person's gonna go run away
as soon as you buy the tickets. Another one that I'm hearing about lately is people who are waiting for tickets at the TKTS line. You're gonna be approached by somebody with a clipboard and they're gonna tell you that they have better tickets if you just talk to one of their associates, and you're really just talking to a ticket scalper who's probably gonna charge you more than you would pay at the TKTS booth. And I've been reading all about this lately from you guys. And the number one issue I see my viewers running into and getting mad about is going to a website like this. It'll have words like BroadwayTickets.com. It'll look like the official reseller, but when you actually go to the site, we have an example here, Aladdin on September 22nd, they have it starting at $104. What you always need to do instead of relying on a random Google search is go to the official box office site. We did just that, and Aladdin for the same night starts at $64.50, almost $40 cheaper. So I'm gonna repeat this, very important. Always start on the official site of the show, not some Broadway site that's gonna trick you to thinking they're the official reseller. Newbies to Broadway may be anxious about how to dress. What would you tell them?
I would tell them, we want everyone to feel welcome in a Broadway theater. You dress however you are comfortable. You are welcome here. The only thing I'm going to tell you though is we have a lot of air conditioning, so it might get cold, so you might want to consider having a jacket with you. But whatever you've got on, come on in. You're welcome here. Used to be people dressed up a lot on a Saturday night to see a show. Those days are over. Come be comfortable, come enjoy yourself. You are welcome here, whatever you got.
All right, Billy, another common issue, people arriving late. There's traffic, the subway breaks down. What do you do if you arrive late? And what time would you tell people they should arrive?
I'd say if you're picking up tickets at the box office, give yourself a half hour before the curtain so you feel comfortable. Get your tickets, you can come in, you can relax, you have time, stand outside if you want. There's gonna be a lot of people doing the same. Give yourself that time. If you've already got your tickets, give yourself 20 minutes, 15 minutes before the curtain to get in, get comfortable. If you want to use a restroom, feel free. As far as late seating, if you are late, well, we're not going to start over, but they will seat you. Now, a lot of shows have very distinct, at the end of this number, that is a moment where we'll seat late seaters. At the end of this scene, that's when we'll seat people. You can't just go in because it is disruptive. So we've got that all very mapped out. It happens all the time. People get up during the show if they need to use a restroom. You're not going to be forbidden to do so. Do your best if you get there early to take care of all that stuff so you can just sit back and enjoy the show till the intermission or till it's over if you don't have an intermission.
And Billy, what about people who forget to turn off their cell phone?
If you can hear it, we can hear it. Don't do it. Turn off your cell phone. And while we're at it, don't think you can sneak pictures of the show or take videos. We see you. They see you. They will report it to an usher immediately and you will be ejected from the building. Don't do it. As far as singing along, don't do that. You paid good money to hear people that have been training their whole lives to do this job, not to hear each other. You're going to really annoy the people around you too.
It's not a Taylor Swift concert.
It is not a sing-along.
I think a mistake that a lot of first-timers make is thinking that all Broadway shows are actually on the street of Broadway. Now, we are standing in front of Broadway, Winter Garden Theater, right there. One of only 2 shows that are still on Broadway, literally on the street, Broadway Theater being the other, and it got the nickname Broadway because at the turn of the 20th century, every single Broadway theater was on this street. Now, it's all around the theater district. Now today, Broadway actually refers to theaters that can hold 500 or more people. An off-Broadway show is 99 to 499 seats, and off-Broadway are 99 seats or lower.
Example, Little Shop of Horrors. That is a small show. It belongs in an off-Broadway venue. It doesn't belong in a big Broadway house. There are shows that are just too big to put in an off-Broadway house. The scope of the show determines where it should sit. Your price point is lower off-Broadway, slightly, but some shows are appropriate for that venue as opposed to a bigger house. We just saw the Britney Spears Once Upon a One More Time in a monstrously big house, and they couldn't make it in a smaller house. They might have survived on Broadway. In an off-Broadway house, they might have run for years. It's impossible to say, but bigger house, more overhead.
All right, Billy, what about food and drink inside the theater? Can you bring your own food and drink? And if you don't, what can you expect price-wise inside?
You cannot bring your own food and drinks into the theater. Don't. People try to bring the rest of their pizza from John's with them. You can't bring it to your seat, folks. Eat before you get here or eat afterwards. Now, in the theater, yes, concessions. The owners of these theaters want to make money on beverages and cocktails and some snack, candy items. And it's going to be very, very expensive. But really, Did you come here to eat and drink, or did you come here to see a show? I think you can go 2 hours without it. Now, there are shows where certain performers will not allow there to be ice in their drinks because they don't want to hear the clack, clack, clack of ice during the performance.
Billy, with so many options on Broadway, picking a show can be overwhelming. How do you tell a first timer to narrow it down?
Well, now, again, it depends on what you want to see. If you've got a family, go see Lion King, go see Aladdin. We have plenty of really good family fare shows out there. If English is not your first language, something like Lion King is a very easy spectacle that you don't have to try to keep up with a plot. If you like movies, Back to the Future, it is a really great representation of the movie on the stage. If you're into something more challenging, go see a play. You might want to go see a drama. We have some wonderful moving theater that isn't musical fare, and a lot of long-standing things like Wicked, Book of Mormon. We have things that have tried and true and been around for years and years, and if you haven't seen them yet, well, there's a reason they're still here. People are loving them.
All right, putting you on the spot, what's your favorite all-time show? Can't say Back to the Future.
Favorite all-time show? Again, I'm going to say Little Shop of Horrors. That is a quality piece of theater. I love that show. I love when people get eaten by a plant.
All right, so a lot of people, they come to the city or they're visiting here and they don't just want to go to a Broadway show. They want to get a drink after, they want to get dinner after. Where are your top picks after all these years?
You know, I do love going over by Schubert Alley on 45th Street to Junior's. Junior's is busy, it's big, but they've got great burgers. They have a brisket over potato pancakes to die, and they have killer cheesecake. I like going over to Junior's. Now, if you want to go someplace that maybe run into a Broadway performer that you just saw, I'd say Joe Allen's over on Restaurant Row on 46th Street. Joe Allen's is a place where Broadway folks will go after, and also upstairs from there is Bar Central, which is a nice place for a cocktail, where a lot of Broadway folks go hang out after a show, so you might just catch someone that you just saw on the stage.
Two of my favorites, one would be Adele's, which is halal food, just a few blocks actually from this theater right here. Now the line can get pretty long, but it's one of my favorite halal trucks in the entire city, and for food, I'm a big fan of a spot called Easy Paella and Tapas, actually in Hell's Kitchen, where you live. I think their paella and some of their Venezuelan fusion stuff is fantastic before or after a show.
And you can't go wrong at John's Pizza right across from the Majestic Theater on 44th Street. That is a quality pizza.
So Billy, actually right when we met you, there were a ton of autograph seekers waiting for the actors to come out. What is the respectful way to get a Broadway actor's autograph after a show?
Line up at our little barricades right there and have a pen ready with you, because you can't expect that they're going to have a marker. Have your playbill ready, have something you want them to sign ready. Don't ask them to sign pictures of themselves or merchandise that you plan to turn around and sell on eBay. They know that's what you want to do, so don't do it. They're not going to do it. Most folks will take a quick picture with you if they have a second. Not everyone does. At the end of the show, a lot of folks just need to get home. And not everyone always feels great after the end of the show, so you can't expect it. But most people will come out after and just have a quick moment with you. A lot of times, fans of the show will send us things backstage. They'll send things that they baked. We're not going to eat them. We can't say for sure who baked it and what's in it, so don't send food backstage. It's a lovely thing to do. We're going to end up throwing it out.
Billy, not only a Broadway veteran, but also a fellow YouTuber. Tell people about your channel.
That's right, I have my own personal channel. It's Billy Hipkins, The Also Ran, ALSORAN. I just talk on the daily most days about my New York life, either what's going on at my theater, what's going on at my apartment, what's going on with my 2 cats that drive me crazy and I love them to death. I just run my big mouth every day, and a lot of people seem to enjoy it, so tune in.
Today I'm going to show you a way to see some of the best sights of New York City at a fraction of the cost of what you pay for a big tour boat. For only $4, we're riding the NYC Ferry, one of the best travel hacks that most tourists have never even heard of. And I'll show you some of my favorite routes. Let's go. How do you buy tickets? You can't use a Metro card on the NYC Ferry. It is $4 one way. The easiest way to handle this is to download the NYC Ferry app and just buy your tickets before you even get to the station. The other way would be to get to any of the ferry terminals and to buy it from one of the machines. Also, if you have a big group and you're going to be taking a few of these ferries, great deal, 10 tickets for $27.50. Rockaway bound boat is one of my favorites for not just sightseeing, but actually going to Rockaway Beach. Super fun. Now, I've seen this line before, like down the block in the heat of the summer. There's some sights on this specific ride that you can't get on any tourist boat in New York City. You need to pick a nice day to do it. Always sit up top, unless it's freezing cold.
The ferries have gotten really high tech. You even can order right from your phone, have everything set and go down and pick it up. Later on in the video, I may even have a beer. All right, the coolest thing about leaving from Pier 11 is you have just this straight on shot of lower Manhattan, the skyline, as you pull out. Not bad. Not a bad view at all. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that these boats are $4 each way. This is not an expensive tour boat. You don't have somebody on an intercom telling you what you're seeing. You're just here to enjoy the views. I love that we have all of Manhattan just trailing behind us here. One thing to keep in mind is that these are commuter ferries, so I would try to avoid peak rush hour times in the mornings and in the late afternoons, just so you have more space to yourself. And now we're approaching one of my favorite bridges in the city, Verrazano. We are going under it. And as I said before, I don't know any other boat that will take you under this bridge. Island is completely deserted. The beach is empty. Normally on a hot summer day, you would see it absolutely packed. It is deserted because of these insane winds. You can see the skyline all the way in the distance. This feels like I'm at the Jersey Shore right now with a bridge like this. The fact that they have a few outlets on the main deck is actually really useful, especially because your ticket is on your phone. You are coming back in the same direction. You do have to exit, get back in line, and head back. I really insist you come to Rockaway Beach for an entire morning or afternoon. Check out the beach, check out the food, check out the beer. Really nice scene here. Of all of the ferries on this video, this is the one if you just want to dedicate to straight up sightseeing, take this. If you have 2 hours, take this ride. Since we just came back from Rockaway, we've got 2 hours to transfer for free. So we're jumping on the next line, included. True story, this is the only line I have not done before this video, and I'm most excited for it. You can already see those bridges. I already see where we're heading. I've heard a lot of tour guides use this acronym, but it's BMW, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Williamsburg Bridge, in order if you want to remember it. It's amazing how many ways you can do the Brooklyn Bridge. Biked it, walked it, going underneath it with a ferry, and I see the people walking right now. This view never gets old, I'm not gonna lie. It never ever gets old. Tip for you before you take the ferry. It's 75 degrees right now and I need this jacket. It is a lot colder on the water, it's a lot windier on the water, so you're almost guaranteed to need a jacket for this. This is by far the most relaxing way to experience New York, I have to say. A lot of the tour boats of New York, the dinner cruises, the Circle Lines, great in their own way, of course, and I think worth the money. But for the budget option, they actually don't go really beyond the Williamsburg Bridge. If you want to go past that on the East River, ferry is pretty much the best way to do it. Because we're passing Roosevelt Island. I love taking the tram there. And then the Queensboro Bridge, okay? Now, if you saw our video about what to do in the summer in New York, we biked over it. Now, for the first time that I can remember, I'm actually going under the bridge on Ferry. It's a first for me. Beautiful bridge, too. Very underappreciated, I think, by most non-New Yorkers. It's Gracie Mansion. Yes, thank you.
In your video?
Sure. You could take over. You're better than me. You're way better than me. One of the reasons I didn't jump out here is I wanted to go under both the RFK and the Hellgate Bridge. And I've never been underneath either of those bridges before. All right, look at the RFK.
are passing probably the last place you want to end up on a trip to New York City, Rikers Island, which is the largest and most notorious jail in New York, with an estimated 10,000 or so inmates passing some time there. And we will leave it at that. So we went under 6 different bridges, and we see 2 more up there, the Whitestone and the Throgs Neck Bridge. A tour company could have just done this and called it the New York Bridges Tours. I think the final piece to this puzzle is when you look straight down at all the places we passed, and I just see the entire Manhattan skyline, clear as can be. It was commuting in style, I gotta say. I don't have this much fun taking the subway. All due respect to Circle Line, I've taken them before. They are literally going the exact same path as the ferry for about, I don't know, 9 or 10 times more money. Now, if you're planning on walking the Brooklyn Bridge, this is why you need to take this boat. Take the ferry to Dumbo, and then you walk back over the Brooklyn Bridge, so you only have to do it once, and you are walking towards the skyline. This is absolutely an amazing idea. Couldn't even get a seat on this, but it doesn't matter because we are just going one stop, 4 minutes. If you have the ability, pick a nice day to do this, not such a windy day to do this. This is a good like intro to New York ferry. I kind of put this on like your requirement. You're required to take this ferry ride, one stop. You visit New York. And now you've got a few options at your disposal. You can explore Dumbo, which I highly recommend you do. And of course, walk back right there to Manhattan via the Brooklyn Bridge. Traveling to New York City can be stressful if you don't pre-plan. And in today's video, I'm gonna share some travel mistakes you want to avoid on your next trip here. Some of these are really common. Here we go. I want you to imagine you spent all this time and money to fly to New York City, and you get to the airport and you didn't plan how you were gonna get to your hotel. This is actually more common than you would think. The New York City airports, they're not like Amsterdam where there's one train that'll take you into the city center. Okay, wait, there is a JFK, the Long Island Railroad, $5 city pass, major travel hack a lot of people don't know about. But when you come to the area airports, plan out how you're getting to your hotel. Will it be a taxi? Will it be an Uber, Revel, or Lyft? From LaGuardia, the options are a little bit more limited, and that's why I always urge people to plan ahead how they're getting to their hotel, because that's just one less stress you don't want to deal with on your first day in the city. If you need to buy a Metro card in New York City and you're not from the United States, listen carefully. If you're paying by credit card, it's going to ask you for a zip code. Put in 99999. That's 5 9s, and you'll be okay to complete that transaction. I've heard about some foreign tourists getting a little bit confused what they're supposed to do because they don't have an American zip code. Just one less mistake you're gonna make here. See our Subway guide video about using OmniPay. It is so easy. Another mistake, walking through Central Park and not thinking you are gonna smell horse manure. It could be pretty strong. The clockwise subway door mistake. I actually have to thank Action Kid for bringing this to my attention. Now, when you go underground to the subway and you see those high entrance moving gates, if you swipe and you go the wrong way, it's gonna lock you out and you're gonna lose that credit. Now this is confusing because you actually have to go counterclockwise inside of these gates. And don't even get me started on trying to bring luggage through them. So my best advice is if you see those and you're a little confused, just use a regular subway entrance. I don't even like using them that much, or just watch other people going through them first. But yes, there are ways you can lose money on that. Thank you, Action Kid. It is a mistake not to look where you're walking in Manhattan. Maybe you come from some small town or city even that really is clean. New York City, not so much the case. Some owners don't clean up after their dogs, and there's all sorts of trash and random litter on the sidewalks. You are asking for trouble if you walk around Manhattan in flip-flops. Just don't. And always look where you're walking, because you are guaranteed to step in some weird stuff if you don't.
And speaking of watching where you're walking, be extra careful when you're walking down the steps on the New York City subway. When it's wet, when it's raining, when it's snowing, it can be very slippery. And some of the steps just aren't in good shape. They can be a little bit uneven. Be extra careful there. There are some apps that I think would be a mistake not to have on your phone if you are visiting New York City. And we're gonna talk about two of them right now. The first, Google Maps. Now wait, everybody has Google Maps, at least most people do, but there's one little trick that so many of you told me about that I even didn't mess with in the past, and that's downloading a map of New York City offline. And it's actually really simple to do with the app. This way, in theory, you don't need data service when you're here because the GPS is gonna work no matter what. Even if you have data, let's say you're in a location that doesn't have cell service, this is still clutch. I just started using the app Seated, and while we cover a lot of cheap eats on the channel, this is a way to save some money eating at more expensive places. Seated shows you restaurants on a map that offer you a percentage of your bill total right back to you after you eat. And I could show you this example here, Pando 39 near Bryant Park in Manhattan, offering 20% back. So let's say you split dinner and drinks for 4 people and it comes out to $200 pre-tax and tip. You'll get $40 in credit right to your phone. You either have to share a photo of the receipt or you can pre-link your credit card. And you can use these credits for Airbnb, for Ubers, for Amazon gift cards. There are so many options here. And as a special bonus, use my referral code JOHN28 to get 20% off your first meal. So it's really cool because if I don't know where to eat, I just check Seated and see like what are the best percentages nearby. And wherever I go, I can read the ratings and make a little money back. It would be a mistake to only walk or take the subway while in New York. There's a lot of cool alternate transit options. We'll start with the Ferry. Now we just shot a video rightfully titled, "This $4 boat ride is New York's best kept secret," because it kind of is. The NYC Ferry is used by commuters and not too many tourists. And the one route I think needs to be a requirement is from Pier 11 Wall Street over to Dumbo in Brooklyn. It takes less than 5 minutes and in my opinion is worth 5 times the $4 charge. There's also the route to Throgs Neck in the Bronx, which as far as I'm concerned is the best cheap sightseeing option in the city. Check out that video for more details. A lot of times in New York City, buses are a good option, especially if you're staying outside of Manhattan, but even in the city, going cross town, let's say through right here in Central Park. You can also ride via OmniPay or with a Metro card, and the routes are available on Google Maps. So if you're hesitant about the subway, consider the bus. I haven't really given enough love to city bikes on the channel, and after we shot a video about the best things to do in New York in the summer, where we biked all over the city, I didn't realize how far the city's bike lanes have come. Now, I would not advise renting a city bike if you are a novice. If you have experience biking in bigger cities, I think you could handle it. It's a cheap way and it's a healthy way to see New York without having to rely on mass transit. But I do advise being careful about other motorists and maybe more so pedestrians in the city not paying attention to that bike lane. It would be a mistake to only eat in Times Square when there is a great neighborhood right next door in Hell's Kitchen. I understand if your hotel is in Times Square and you're tired, you've been sightseeing all day, just seeing the Olive Garden makes you feel at peace, but don't do it. All right, I admit I am a sucker for Bubblegum Shrimp's happy hour. It was pretty good. But if you just walk 2 avenues over, you will hit 9th Ave. And 9th Ave, I think, is one of the most underrated food strips in all of Manhattan. Easy Paella, one of my favorite restaurants in the city, is there. Zorali, which is a Dominican lunch spot, pretty cheap, also on that stretch. So walking 9th Ave, you're gonna feel more like a local New Yorker. You're gonna go to restaurants that aren't all chains, and you're gonna have more of that authentic experience, which I think is why you're traveling to New York in the first place. If you enjoy this channel and want to save time planning and avoid the tourist traps, consider shopping our New York City guides. These work on your phone, have built-in GPS with maps. We've got itineraries, places to eat, and a whole lot more. Use code BAR20 for 20% off your purchase. This is our only sale of the entire year. See the link down below in the description. This one's controversial, but I think a mistake in Central Park is taking a horse-drawn carriage ride. Now, I understand the appeal of this. It's been around since the 19th century. You've got that vision of the romantic horse-drawn carriage. But keep this in mind, last summer, one of the horses collapsed from heat exhaustion. There's other similar stories out there, so I'm not gonna tell you what to do, but really do your homework on this practice. I personally wouldn't take one of those carriages, and I don't think your New York trip is incomplete if you do skip them. Instead, if you want the same tour in Central Park, I recommend a pedicab. Now you might be thinking, wait, didn't you mention pedicabs as a potential scam in one of your videos? And I did, but the ripoff there would be just jumping blindly on a pedicab in Midtown Manhattan without negotiating a price first, because some of them are very costly on a per minute basis. But what I really recommend are some of the top pedicabs in the city who do specialized tours. It would be a mistake not to pre-book an observation deck if you have a very tight timeline. And I actually got this from a viewer. Not sure if this counts, but we booked the Summit One Vanderbilt a few weeks in advance for 9 a.m. today. We were there 15 minutes early in the second group to go up, and it was really chill. As we moved through the rooms, it was even empty in a few of them as people were spread out. All right, this is very solid advice, not just for New York City, but for like theme parks in general or any attractions. If you want to make sure you get some of the best photos, outside of going with all the crowds at sunset, go first thing in the morning, especially if the weather is cooperating. If you're in that first group, you will get the best pictures, especially at a spot like Summit One Vanderbilt, which I've heard lately is getting super crowded. Excellent advice. It would be a mistake not to utilize rush tickets for Broadway shows if you really want to save a lot of money. Now, we have harped time and time again about the TKTS booth in Times Square to get discounted tickets for Broadway shows, but what we really haven't talked about are rush tickets, which in the past involved going to the theater the day of the show in the morning and getting in line for unsold seats. Now, some select theaters still do this, but many now have digital lotteries. And how it works is the day before the show, you simply enter your name on the app, and it's just like going to the theater early. I found this article at BroadwayWorld.com, and it's a really good breakdown of each show's policies. I do have a warning about this. Most of them have a cap of 2 tickets, so if you're a big group, it could be tricky, and sometimes they'll even separate you from the other person that you're with. This is actually perfect if you're by yourself. Personally, I find Hamilton the musical to have the coolest one. They offer $10 rush tickets, $10 like Hamilton, the bill. You could attempt rush tickets from a box office or app in the morning, and if that fails, go to the TKTS booth a few blocks away if you have the time and you're just dead set on cheap tickets. And I am curious, if any of you seen Back to the Future yet, I'm really wondering how that show is. The New York City subway system transits 4 million riders a day, and while it's not the world's easiest, my goal today is to break it down for first-timers so you avoid all the mistakes I've made in the past. Let's go. This is probably my most requested video ever because so many tourists are intimidated by the subway, but you shouldn't be. And at the end of this, I'm gonna take you through a sample ride, so pay close attention. Simply put, a single ride on the New York City subway costs $2.75. The MTA recently made a proposal to raise the subway cost to $2.90 a ride after Labor Day. Not official yet, but it would be the first fare increase in 4 years. Currently, a 7-day pass, $33, and a 30-day pass, $127. A big area that has given my viewers a lot of confusion is OmniPay. We are just gonna break this down entirely. So for most of my viewers watching, if you have a credit card with contactless payment or a credit card saved to a wallet on your Android or iOS device, you can use OmniPay. You just tap and go. You don't need any special app downloaded for this. The only time you would be required to have a Metro card anymore would be if you're taking the air train at JFK Airport. You would have to pay $8.25 plus a $1 fee for buying said Metro card. And essentially, you've just bought a $9.25 souvenir as far as I'm concerned, because you really don't need this. Now, I've heard that they may have contactless payment enabled at the air train in the near future, so by the time you watch this video, if it's in a few years, you might not even need that Metro card, period. Now, if you are traveling with a family or a small group, pay attention to this, because I get a lot of questions about how many swipes you can get with one card or how many taps you can get with one Omni device or credit card, and the answer is 3 extra. You can swipe once and then get 3 extra people on 3 different swipes before the card isn't available to be used anymore. So if you have more than 4 people, you either need 2 Metro cards or 2 different ways to pay with Omni Tap. If you have small children, kids 44 inches or under ride for free. In fact, I didn't even realize this till I researched this video. I once saw a mom encourage her little daughter to run under the turnstile, and I thought,
What are they teaching these kids today? And now I realize because she's free.
Let's talk unlimited cards and if you should get a 7-day unlimited pass. Now this is kind of a tricky topic. Omni offers a 7-day unlimited pass through their contactless payment. It's called fare capping. You can only do it on one device or card. Now if you tap 12 times with any Omni payment, you automatically get the rest of the rides for the week free, which sounds pretty straightforward, but this only works from Monday at 12 a.m. to Sunday at 11:59 p.m., which means if you're a tourist and you're arriving on a Thursday and you're gonna be using the subway like crazy and you want the unlimited, Omni's probably not gonna make sense for you. So the bottom line is, unless your trip fully lines up with a Monday to a Sunday, if you need to go unlimited, buy separate cards for each member of your group. And special shout out to one of my viewers, Mark Finley, for pointing out how Omni Unlimited really isn't that great for tourists. Probably the best piece of advice I can give you on this video is to have Google Maps downloaded on your phone. Having a smartphone in general in this city is gonna make transportation 99% easier. Google Maps will tell you exactly what exit to take when you get to a new station. And something in the past that I've recommended is City Mapper. I don't use City Mapper as much anymore because I now live at a local station, and City Mapper doesn't tell me on weekends when subways are skipping my stop, and that's somewhere where Google Maps is a lot stronger. So honestly, between the two, I use Google Maps a lot more now, and you have to have that on your phone. It's just gonna save you so much hassle here. Whenever you're looking for a specific subway station, make sure that it is the exact one that you need. And I can't illustrate this point any better. We were filming this video and we had a lost tourist approach us, and he thought that he was at the Spring Street 6 station. He was actually at the Spring Street CE station. So you have to not only know the name of your station, but what line you're taking. And don't get me started on the 4 23rd Street stations or the 3 different Canal Street options. Same thing if you're meeting somebody, if you're meeting a friend at any station, don't say I'm meeting at Canal, say I'm meeting at the 6 train at Canal. Maybe give the corner as well. Now, if you're new to New York City, you have to realize that we have local and express trains. Local go to every single station, where express is gonna skip the local stops and go a little bit more quickly to some of the bigger stations. And some of the most common express stops you'll see all over the city: 59th, 42nd, 34th, and 14th Streets. Here's a little tip for you. If you see people running down the stairs, they probably see that the subway just arrived. So if you're in a rush, you might want to run too. For my tourists watching or spending most of their trip in Manhattan, when you look at the subway signs here, you're generally gonna see either uptown, meaning heading for Harlem, downtown, heading for Financial District, and then you'll see another destination of Queens. But you really have to pay attention to the uptown and the downtown when you're looking at this. Every single station in the city has a board that tells you the timetables, and they are very accurate. So when I first moved to New York, this was not a thing at every station. Had to check by phone. Don't even need your phone to know when your train is coming and which side it's coming on as well. Let's discuss entering and exiting stations, and this could be a little bit tricky if you're not overwhelmed already. One thing to look for is many smaller stations have these globes here. That's how you know a subway entrance is there. Some huge stations you can just tell by the exterior, but any of the smaller ones, this is your clue from far away. Now this is where sometimes even New Yorkers will mess up if they race into a station without checking. If the sign for the subway only says uptown, it's usually a smaller local station, you'll see this. You can only enter in one direction, meaning if you enter in the downtown spot and you want to go uptown, you have a few options. 1, cut your losses, exit, cross the street, swipe again. 2, take the subway one stop and hope that the next station has an underpass or a way to connect going the opposite direction. 3, you can ask the station attendant nicely to let you go. There's one other thing you could see. It might say downtown, uptown, and underpass, meaning you can go to the downtown side and there's gonna be a staircase leading to the uptown side. Now in this example here, when it doesn't say downtown, uptown, or underpass, it means that you can go both uptown and downtown from this 57th Street station. Another tip for you is that these subway stations are super, super hot in the summer. So if you don't have to spend that much time down here, the timetables on Google Maps are very accurate, so maybe at about the 5-minute mark, I would consider heading in because I have had some awful experiences. Heat of the summer, humidity, save time, stay above ground as long as possible. Let's talk transferring within stations. Now, in almost every instance, transferring is free inside of a station. This is not like Tokyo where you have to swipe again and pay twice. You can transfer multiple times within the subway system and not have to pay more than $2.75. We're gonna talk some safety tips right now, and the zebra board, also known as the indication board behind me, is a big one. Let's say you're riding the subway by yourself late at night. You wanna make sure you're sitting in the same car as the conductor. Find this indication board. That is where the conductor will be because they always point at it when they stop at a station. An added bonus with this, you know where the conductor is if you have questions like, is this train going to a certain spot? Very useful. When the train comes, don't stand in front of the door for your own safety because you're gonna get some angry New Yorkers cursing at you for blocking their path. Stand back, let them go, and then board the subway. When you're riding on any subway car, don't make eye contact with strangers. Like the New York City subway, it's not the friendliest place. Just mind your own business and you should be okay. If you do witness erratic behavior, you'll see a lot of other New Yorkers doing this. At the next station, exit and go to another subway car. I've even had to do this a handful of times in my 12 years living in the city. Here's one you learn the hard way. If you ever board a subway car and it's completely empty, there's probably a reason for it. You'll find out why. I literally saw somebody doing this today on my way to this shoot. Don't stop in the middle of a busy path like this to check your subway directions. Now, luckily no one's behind me right now, but this lady actually caused a little bit of a traffic jam as everybody had to swerve around her. For your own safety, and try not to get run over or cursed at, don't do that. I get a lot of questions about accessibility and New York City. I hate to say it, but the New York City subway needs a lot of work when it comes to being handicap accessible. So for example, in Manhattan, only 36 of 147 stations are wheelchair accessible. And when it comes to elevators, most major stations have them, but they smell, well, I can't think of the right word. Use your imagination. They smell terrible. And now we're gonna put all this knowledge to the test. We're gonna do a sample ride from here in Greenwich Village, uptown to Carnegie Diner and Cafe. Follow along. I always would recommend picking the route that does not have any transfers, especially if you're new here. We're gonna take the F train. We found the right entrance, West 4th, Washington Square, looking for the F train. We're not looking for the orange line, we're just looking for the F to make sure that letter is here. It is here, and we're gonna go down. We got two choices here, Uptown, Queens, F. So we're gonna go this way. The other side says downtown. We're not going downtown. And don't get confused by this downtown Brooklyn ACE stuff. That's to go to the other side. Stick to your letters. Always follow the signs with your letter. Another reminder, Uptown, F train, here. And just in case you missed it the last 3 times, F train, this direction, FM, BD on the left, that's express. We're looking for the local train. This train just passed, F and the M. This is the M train. We don't want this one. Don't just hop onto the first train you see. Make sure it's the one you actually trying to take. We have another Uptown Express train on the other track, also not taking that. Remember, we are not looking for the color, we are looking for the exact letter here, F. Now this is telling me the next train is now 12:57, and we look up at the board, it's confirming it. Remember what I said? All the subway stations now have boards that tell you pretty accurate timetables. You look up, it points in the direction of the F train. This side, arriving now. F train's here, let the people exit. They always announce the next stop. They just said it's 14th Street, so we know that it's heading uptown. You can also check up there to make sure you're going in the right direction by the different stops listed. We made it to 57th Street. Now we have to find the right exit. We're looking for 6th Ave and 57th. Most of the time, if you exit at the wrong place, it's not a big deal. You're still gonna be pretty close to where you have to be, but just save yourself the trouble. And there it is, across the street. Now that you know the subway like a pro, visiting New York City requires a lot of street smarts. In this video, we tell you what tourist traps, scams, and rip-offs to avoid. Make sure to watch this next.